Terrible, man.
Really?
Terrible. They comped it. Well done, cold steak, ordered medium rare.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Selectmen, Highway Commissioner, Cemetery Commissioners meeting of Monday, January 14th. First order of business is rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to do a out of order with the board's pleasure. Take the police chief out of order. He has an engagement at 7 o'clock. So at this point, I'll have the police chief come up for 9E. No, I'm sorry, 9F. And his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
What I'm trying to do is replace the base radio station, our radio at our station downstairs, because as you know, we went to the regional dispatch setup a few years back, and our radio down there is in need of replacement. It's starting to get old. So one of the things I've been trying to do is fund this through grants. I tried through the 911 department and through Homeland Security, a few other entities, but kind of hit some roadblocks. So I was having a conversation with our senator last week and just asking him about some potential funding sources. So he might have some ideas about ways to fund it. It's probably about around $100,000, so that's why it's not something we want to take out of operational costs right now. So all he requested was just to make sure that the Board of Selectmen was behind him trying to pursue this project. So he just asked if the Selectmen could put a letter together just saying that they would support the request for about $100,000 to fund a radio at the police station. Now, the whole purpose of this, too, was that when we went to the regional, the regional setup, we could use our station as a potential backup site should there be an issue down there as well. So by bringing something in new, this would enhance that capability, so that if there was a problem down there, they could just relocate here and run everything except 911 right out of our station downstairs.
Mr. Chairman? Have you discussed the writing of the letter?
I discussed this issue with Greg last week, yes, so it's should not really be a big issue.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we authorize the chief and the town administrator to send a letter to Senator Fatman requesting funding assistance for the police radio system for the department.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Greg, we okay with that?
We are.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank
Want to do your report, or you got to go?
I appreciate it.
Want to do your report, or you got to go? You all good? You good with your report?
Yeah, I don't have too much else to report. I think we'll be looking at, let's see, we got, maybe have some weather over the weekend. We're going to try to look into that a little bit. And I think the highway superintendent will probably discuss about putting out any notification on our local social media pages and anything if there's a parking ban. So we'll have to have that done at some point. But hopefully we don't get too much and work our way from there.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, appreciate it.
No problem.
Give our best to Mr. Shaw, the new chief in Webster.
Thanks,
Mr.
Chief.
Chairman,
Mr. Ruda.
as part of that request to speak with Greg, I would just ask that Greg also speak with the highway and the fire department. If we have to make a request or if there's funding available, we should probably loop in the other two departments as well.
Absolutely.
Next up on the agenda is the minutes from last Monday, January 7th. What's the board's pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes of January 7th, 2018.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussions or corrections?
I have read them, and I'm prepared to vote on them also.
Call to a vote. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Next up is an appointment, resignation, joint appointment with the Board of Health, Laurie Dusham, term to expire 6/10/19, date of the local election. Board of Health, come forward, please, with your candidate, who we met last week. Who's presenting for the board?
Good evening, I'm Jennifer Canoyer, Chairman of the Board of Health. We would like to recommend that you would appoint Laurie Dusham as our third Board of Health member.
Roe,
Yes.
good with that?
Mm-hmm. I am.
Board members, any questions? She was in last week. We talked to her quite a bit. I know you.
No, I know who Lori is, and have a great deal of respect for what she will bring to the Board of Health.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ruda.
I'll move that we didn't appoint last
No.
time, right?
You gotta wait till
So
you guys.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Laurie Ducharme with a term to the Board of Health with a term to expire 6/10/19.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Now, Greg, we call the Board of Health to vote also, do it?
I would suggest you do a roll call vote, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Carrie Sigenovich, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
John Ruda, aye.
Jennifer Canoyer, aye.
Roberta Johnson, aye.
Unanimous.
Congratulations.
Welcome on.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We expect big things out of the Board of Health.
Absolutely. First time with all women.
It's that date because it.
Next up under appointments, Fire Department. Nicholas Daly, Fire and EMS Chief. Dean Kochanowski, bringing forward your candidate.
She has to run past that date.
Mr. Chairman, just a clarification before we move on. Did the motion that we just voted on indicate the date that she will serve until?
Yes, June 10th, 19, which is the local
It didn't,
election.
the motion didn't include that. Okay.
Yes.
Chief, good evening.
So, as you're aware, one of our full-time employees left to be employed somewhere else. Maria Soja left for the town of Auburn, leaving a vacancy in our full-time staff. Last week, we conducted a series of interviews for the final 3 candidates, and we chose Nicholas Daly from Douglas, so I'll let him speak on behalf of himself.
Good evening. I'd like to take the time to thank the members of the Board of Selectmen, Chief Kochanowski, and the entire town of Dudley for giving me this opportunity to advance my career to become a full-time firefighter EMT. So the town of Dudley has always been a department in which I've looked at from the outside in, and I've always admired the town greatly, and the fire department specifically, because of the amount of work they do, their professionalism while doing that work, and their commitment to the community and their dedication to the job. So I believe there's really no better place to start my career as a firefighter and learn and grow within your town. I'd like to thank you all from the bottom of my heart, truly. I'm really excited and grateful for this opportunity you've given me. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
Oh, but that was one hell of a little speech. I think it's the first time we've gotten one with that kind of enthusiasm and
That was
affect
impressive.
I did
in a long time.
I did leave a copy of his resume in your packets, too.
Yep.
So I have a question. I see it says you're with the Douglas Dispatch and Fire. Will you continue to work in those departments if you're appointed here?
Yes, sir. I will continue to pick up shifts with the Douglas Police Department as emergency dispatcher, as well as work, call, fire, and emergency management in the town of Douglas.
Okay, and those would be part-time, right?
Of course, sir.
Okay. Nothing further.
Chief McGonigal sad he's losing you?
He's not completely losing me, but he was a little disheartened, if you will.
Guy's got a good crew over there.
Oh, yes, we do, sir.
Kerry,
Yes,
anything?
I looked over this. He sure can, he's got the public speaking thing down pat, that's for sure. No, I've got nothing.
Mr.
Thank you.
Ruda?
Just the paramedic thing is completed?
I have completed my didactic portion, and I'm moving on to the clinical and ride phase.
Okay. All
I
right.
like his volunteer efforts.
Congratulations on being an Eagle Scout, by the way.
Thank you very much, sir.
Not an easy achievement.
Town next door in Webster.
Pretty well put together
very
candidate,
good.
Chief.
What's that?
Pretty well put together candidate. Hearing nothing further, ask for a motion to appoint.
I move, Mr. Chairman, I move that we appoint Nicholas Daly to a full-time position on the fire department, effective this date.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint effective January 14, 2019. Hearing any further questions? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
Aye.
Welcome to the board, to the town.
That's a unanimous vote,
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, we got room for him.
Yeah, we
Come
do.
on up and shake some
Yeah.
hands. And is anybody from your family here for a picture, or you're all alone?
No, sir, just me.
Yeah,
I think it's a great idea.
probably get kids the same age, so I could probably step in.
Oh, you get to come in the middle in the gauntlet.
Thank you very much, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir.
Congratulations.
Thank you very
Sean
much.
Fleming's marrying my daughter.
Oh, well, thank you very
Good
much.
luck to you now.
Thank you very much, sir.
So you've been vetted.
The fire chief gonna be in this? Yeah, we want the fire chief.
Face that way.
Assistant Chief.
So about the assistant chief, you want the,
Sullivan, if you can just, there you
you want the assistant
Have the
chief?
assistant chief come up and add some credibility to
We
this.
ask every
I'm telling you, 785, you better get out there. Whatever he gets.
There we go.
Paul, if you can just slide that way.
Perfect.
What do you need?
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Chief.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Take care.
Yep, good luck, Nick. Next up, we have public comments, citizen comments, informational. Anybody wishing to be heard that are not on the agenda tonight, come forward now or forever hold your peace. Hearing none. Town administrator report, Mr. Valiakonis.
Pass.
Pass. Round town, working on it. License and permits, we have none. Public hearing. Poll hearing for National Grid and Verizon New England, Inc., joint pole, Baker Pond Road, National Grid to install one joint operated pole on Baker Pond Road beginning
Are you from the utility, sir? Yes, sir. Have a seat.
approximately 15 feet east of the center line of the intersection of Causeway Shore Road, National Grid to install one new joint-owned pole, 17-1, and anchor it in the public way to replace an existing tree guy and to service a new house lot, 74 Baker Pond. Public hearing open at 6:50, I so declare. Sir, good evening.
Good evening.
What do we got?
I am Patrick Shea from National Grid. I'm a designer over there. Just here to represent, this was not my job, but another fellow designer did this design, that we have a existing guy wire going into a tree in front of the new house at 74 Baker Pond Road, and that guy wire supports our line going down Causeway Shores Road. We really just don't like the non-standard guy wires in trees. They're just not stable, they're not good. So we're proposing to install a new jointly owned pole with us and Verizon to install a new guy wire to support that line going down Causeway Shores Road.
Greg?
You typically take out any hardware that's in the tree when you relocate the wire?
Yes, yeah, we'll take the support that goes into the tree out and restore as best as possible.
Thank you.
Mr. Joseph?
Nothing. I'm okay with this. Period.
How are they doing on the double poles?
You know, we've got, what, another 8 or 9 double poles in town?
We get a few.
Well, you seem like a nice guy.
I try.
So we're not going to turn you down this time. However, well, I can't speak for the whole board. I won't vote to turn you down. But if we get another request for a pole for a doghouse, and those double poles have not been addressed, tell the guy, don't even bother.
Yes, sir.
Don't come. Go somewhere else, have a nice night out. Because I won't vote for approval. Okay?
Okay.
Harry?
Well, it's good to get one out of a tree and have a freestanding pole instead of it
Yep.
being in a tree, isn't it?
Yes.
That makes sense to me.
Well, we were making substantial progress on those double poles, and it seemed like it kind of
We have.
ground to a halt there last 6, still going?
Mason owns the majority of them.
Yeah, well, the Verizon wants half of this permission, too. It's not really, not necessarily that, those guys, it's National, it's Verizon
Well,
that, we can't get their attention.
Well, you know what? If we turn down the next one, we've been through this dance
Wow.
many times. And it's impossible to imagine that two corporations as big as National Grid and Verizon can't convince each other to do what's necessary to take down these double poles. Some of the, by the way, some of the double poles are crooked. I mean, they go up and then they take a branch off. They go somewhere else. So, I mean, it's fair warning, all right? But you seem like a nice guy. We don't want to make you feel bad,
Thank you, sir.
okay?
Nobody leaving in tears tonight.
No.
Mr. Ruda.
All set.
Chair will entertain a motion to, well, first off, we'll close the public hearing at 6:56. So closed. Chair will entertain a motion to grant the request before us from National Grid Verizon, Inc.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we grant the request from National Grid and Verizon New England Incorporated for a joint pole on Baker Pond Road. I'm going to read this whole paragraph just so it's all in the minutes. Granted National Grid to install one JO pole on Baker Pond Road beginning at a point approximately 15 feet east of the center line of the intersection of Causeway Shores Road. National Grid is to install one new JO pole 17-1, an anchor in the public way to replace and to remove an existing tree guy and to service a new house on lot of 74 Baker Pond Road.
Second.
Motion made and
Just to
seconded.
clarify,
Mr. Joseph?
that a JO referred to here means jointly owned
Yes.
by National Grid, and we know that, but the
Right.
people listening may not.
I just wanted to get it word for word what was here.
Got it, it's a great, well done.
Hearing nothing else, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. With the board's pleasure, I want to take public business out of order. We'll do the house cleaning articles, and then we'll come back to the Municipal Resources, Inc. The other ones are just perfunctory votes, I believe. Not much there. So we're going to go to 9B, Dudley Highway Department, construction material bid. Mr. Paletta, Senior.
The annual materials bid went out and was opened on 1/7 at 1 PM. And I believe you got the results.
They're in the packet, Vin.
The first column is basically, I think, the best choice for the town. And there wasn't a lot of materials that had multiple bidders on them. And many items, no bids at all.
So Vinnie, what do we do with the no bid things? Like,
Quote,
just gonna go out and buy them when you need them?
quotes.
So when we need the materials, typically what we do is we go out and buy them for individual projects.
Right.
I usually like to get 3 quotes on everything that's not bid.
All right, let's get the part of this cleared up first.
Sure.
Certainly the issue about no bids and how to handle them and requirements for how much we will spend at one time, state law, authorizations, town policy, et cetera. But, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we accept the recommendations of the highway superintendent, acting highway superintendent, for all items for which bids were received. And I'm assuming you want to go with the lowest in all cases. If not, then we got to make exception, because my motion would be the lowest bids. And if there are exceptions, I'd like to note them first.
Well, the only one, I think, is item number 2. And it'll be for cold patch. And the lowest bid is $100. But the bid that I'd like to accept is $105, only because it's 6 miles to the plant versus 20 miles to the plant.
Each way. Yeah, 20
Correct,
miles.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, which bid would you want us to accept?
Amarillo.
2, item number 2,
Yep,
cold patch,
right, which bid?
Amarillo's,
Amarillo.
left column.
Yeah, I see it.
It's $105.
Because you'll tear up more in gas going that extra
Yeah,
14 miles.
Exactly. Get the fuel, the wear and tear on the truck, and the hourly rate for the employee.
Right.
It's actually cheaper to go with the more expensive bid.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Joseph?
how many tons of cold patch out do we normally use in a given fiscal year? Ballpark.
Probably around 100 ton, 10 truckloads.
All right. So 100 times $5 difference is $500. And what do you estimate you'll save on gas as a result of going with that bid versus the other lower bid?
It's diesel, and I'm really not into the gas, only the gas and diesel budget.
It's also the time?
I'm sorry?
Is it also the time that?
It's an hour, yeah, so it's an hour at a time. I'm not really too familiar with the gas and the diesel budget yet. So I really honestly can't answer the question on the fuel, but
I think last year we did similar to this. We took that bid.
Yep.
Oh, it's the same thing coming up if we do asphalt too, only because of the distance and the,
See, we can see the figures,
Right.
you know, and you know the figures. And often I'll ask questions, not because I need the information, but I want to be sure that
Yep.
the public hears the information. So it'll come very close to a wash by
Oh,
going with that bid versus the $5 lower bid per ton.
Yep. And if Amarillo doesn't have patch available, I'm going to the next bidder anyway, so, and that's
Okay.
happened a lot of times. Or even the asphalt, if the plant is broke down, we're gonna go to the next highest bidder.
Okay, are there any others that you want to not go with the low bidder?
Paul,
yeah, take-
second page, item 3,
right.
screen and wash sand at the pit. So the recommended bid is $14.25. And for the same reason that Mr. Porter just stated, the fact is the distance to the pit is significant,
No, that's even closer. That's only 4 miles.
4 miles.
Yeah, it's only $2.75.
And we've also had good luck with their material, right, through the years,
That's
Vinnie?
10 or 17,
We've good-
15.
The sand.
His material is,
Screen and wash sand, Vin.
right.
Are there any others?
That
Four.
appears,
Oh, no, I'm sorry, no. Right, that's just the increase.
no, that appears to be it.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, so there are only 2 exceptions. You don't want to go with the low bidder.
I'm sorry?
Only 2 exceptions.
Correct.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Yep.
I'd like my motion to read that we support awarding the bids as recommended by the acting highway superintendent, which are for supplies for the year, which is the low bidder in each case, with the exception of item 2, coal patch, where we are going to award it to Amarillo and Sons, and item 3, screened and washed sand. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's out of the pit,
That's at the pit.
and that'll go to Hilker instead of the low bidder. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's my motion then.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Further discussion on the presentation? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Vinnie, nice job, thank you.
I'm sorry?
Nice job, thank you.
What about the no bids? Do we have to comply with certain state laws, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
so we purchase the items, we'll get quotes, written quotes on each time we want to purchase it for a project, just as we need it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Rich Carmignani Jr., Town Treasurer Collector, looking for us to vote to adopt Mass General Law, Chapter 32, 11, talk about it, and vote to approve updating the town's health insurance and approve notification letter. Good evening, Mr. Carmignani.
Good evening. Thank you. What we have here is a letter. It's more of an internal piece of paper generated from my office with the help of Brian Boyle, who is our healthcare consultant, along with Greg. What this is a reminder. Right now, everybody who is employed by the town of Dudley, receiving their health insurance, who is Medicare eligible, needs to enroll according to the guidelines. There's no opting out. I can't retire and say, well, I'd like to stay on the PPO or the HMO. It is a must. It's Mass General Law, and that's the way we need to operate. This little piece of paper is our friendly reminder that says 90 days before your effective date, you need to get the ball rolling. This isn't something internally the town of Dudley can do. You need to put on your big boy pants or big girl pants and enroll. We need your paperwork in a timely manner. It means that you can't give it to us the night before or 3 days after. We need time to process it and get it to the trust. So not only do we need to involve the Social Security office, which gives you all of this paperwork for your enrollment, we need to receive it and review it for its completeness. We need to get it to the Hampshire Council of Governments Insurance Trust so that they put their mark on it that everything is good, and ultimately enroll you with Blue Cross. So there's a lot of steps. Previously, there was no catch-all letter like this. We created it so that you start, you sign this. So we're gonna have a 25-year-old who's gonna start at the town of Dudley, and 40 years from now, unless the law changes, this says, I know this is my responsibility, I accept my responsibility, and you know what? I can't wait for you to turn 65 and to retire and have a great retired life. We're drawing out our parameters that say, well ahead of time, you need to do this. For fear that they don't do it. And we're doing this to prevent a bad situation from happening. Everybody on the Board of Selectmen knows we have a policy in place. The policy says that you will be offered health insurance once you retire. Okay, it's not a, well, if I wanted, it's there. It's pick an employee in the town of Dudley. When they hit that point in time, they smile and say, it's time, I'm gonna miss you guys, but not that much. You go through and you retire, you receive your superannuation benefit, you separate from service, and your health insurance as a retiree kicks in. There's a simultaneity. All three are at once. We don't separate from service and then pick up our health insurance 6 months. It's a single fluid process, okay? So the idea is that everything is lined up. If you do not follow through on your Medicare enrollment as prescribed by the law and as outlined, health insurance won't be offered to you again. So I look to my right, I see our town administrator who's got that on his mind. He's gonna make sure and enroll in a timely manner. If he doesn't, he'll be deemed not eligible for Medicare and our Medicare insurance, in which case I'll disqualify him and the benefit will not be offered to him or his spouse again. So it's get it right the first time because there's too many repercussions later.
But Rich, this was something they would handle with you, right? They would go see you, say, I'm leaving in 6 months, you would show them how to get the ball rolling.
Right. It's not all us. You need to enroll with the Social Security office.
Right.
The town of Dudley doesn't determine your Medicare eligibility. But I know enough, 90 days before is when you can enroll, before you turn 65, and then there's a whole bunch of laws. I can't do anything. No one from the town of Dudley can go through and enroll someone. It's something they need to bring back. I need to have those cards in hand to forward to the trust and then to Blue Cross. And we need enough time to do it because of everything that's in place. We can't just backdate it.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Ruda.
Rich, is there like a, if somebody announces their intention to retire, is there an outgoing package or memo that they would receive where they said, hey, 40 years ago, when I was 25, I signed a piece of paper that I am now to remember 40 years later, or?
It's proactive. I want to say that your mailbox is going to be full of notifications when you're getting close to being 65. We receive a notice they're gonna get a notice that when Rich Carmignani turns 65, 6 months ahead of time, that little notice is coming out, and we're not stingy with the information. This letter says it's your responsibility, but we're not abdicating our role in it. It's in addition to, so that we don't wind up with that 1% situation where somebody doesn't enroll on time and our policy says that we're not covering you.
Is it,
We don't want to put our foot in the bucket.
but is there something specific when we offboard somebody where they have a chance to be reminded of things like this? That even though it's understood that their mailbox gets hit up and...
Yep, there is an internal follow-up letter that says, we will be doing this. You'll need to do this. I believe the letter states, 90 days prior to your birthday, you can enroll, Medicare coverage effective, and it's the first of the month following your birthday. I don't believe it includes the, you need to do this, or this is your only time. I will update the letter so that our notification puts the correct emphasis on please do this. And the only situation we would ever have is that somebody just dragged their feet and didn't do it in enough time.
So we have to vote to adopt
Paul?
this Mass General law and to
I
approve the
think-
letter?
I think so.
Is that what we're...
I think I have three questions.
Of course.
The first is that we're being asked to do two things, and I want to be sure that I understand as well as the public. Are there any other obligations or points of interest to the town by adopting 32B, which is one of the things that you're asking us to do? Is it only about this issue, or is there any other issues that 32B applies to the town then?
We've already adopted 32B.
These subsections.
Which subsections?
21 to 23.
So Paul, I can maybe clarify. Every time the town wants to make changes in its plan, we need to provide notice under these sections of Chapter 32B. So as Rich has highlighted, there are a number of changes that we wish to make, so we need to go through the process of just providing notification.
Okay, so adopting 32B, 21 through 23, is only regarding the issue that Rich has brought forward?
Correct.
Okay. That's the first question. Second question, outside of the one-time letter, and this is what concerns me, is that people who this would apply to will remember it because it's on tonight's agenda. But beyond that, people may tend to forget if they don't act right away. So my question is, to you and to Rich, what kind of ongoing guidance will the town provide to its employees to make sure that we keep them from falling into this chasm, this abyss, which is known as Medicare?
Right. The real abyss is failure to enroll in enough time, and then the health insurance benefit never being offered to you again. That's the real abyss. We're proactive. The second we get notification, a letter goes out. The responsibility ultimately falls on the employee. Okay, you're old enough to work for the town of Dudley, have a great career and retire. You need to go the last 10 feet to cross the finish line. We do notify them, absolutely.
I think in the environment we live in 2019, as Rich has pointed out, we need to be crystal clear that the former employee retiree has certain obligations to go to the Social Security office to enroll, and in the absence of really detailed regulations, people want to come back and blame Mr. Carmignani when their enrollment is done in a non-timely manner, and this policy kind of ties up those loose ends, Paul.
Okay.
It ties them up to say it's the employee's responsibility.
And my third and final question is a question I ask routinely, and that is that, how long has it been since we last put out to bid a provider for our health care for our employees?
Rich, I'll have to defer to you on that one.
We haven't. We were accepted to the trust, 5 years ago? It's an enviable position in that our neighbors and our school district have tried to get in and haven't passed muster. So we are in an enviable position in that we are with a larger purchasing group that does better than our peers. I can't imagine a situation where the town of Dudley on their own would beat a group of 70, 71 people in the form of a trust that already has the nest egg there.
Okay, here's what I'm going to ask, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask that the board authorize Greg and Rich to co-author a letter, and just informing us that at this time, it's best not to put out our healthcare provider work or opportunity to other vendors at this time.
I have no problem with it,
Okay,
Paul.
happy to do something like that. I'm
No,
certain.
no, not something like that. Here's why. I don't want an employee or an heir or a descendant or a relative of an employee claiming that we did not do what was best in terms of health care for their mother, father, son, or daughter. That's why I want that letter. Because it is unusual to not go out to bid regularly. And I understand exactly what you said, and it makes sense. I just want a matter of record as to why we're not going out to bid.
Hadn't we proxied that to the trust?
I beg your pardon?
We're a member of the trust.
The trust.
We're a voting member of the trust, so the due diligence.
It's the trust.
Would be the trust.
Hampshire Council,
We didn't swear a blind allegiance to this provider, which is most predominant in Central Mass. We're in a joint purchase agreement that has a trust, and each year they do their due diligence in a renewal.
I trust that, and I trust that's one of the reasons why we're staying with them. What I'm saying is, I want us, you and Rich, to put into writing why we're not going out to bid, why we're staying, and why this is the right way for the town. That's all.
Paul, I have no problem with that.
You okay with that?
Yeah,
Okay,
Just a couple bullet
yeah,
points.
I'm okay with that.
okay?
Wonderful,
Bingo. Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Rich, I just have a couple quick questions
of course.
on the formatted highlighting things.
Yes.
It looked confusing at first, but I think I figured it out. It says within, used to say within, like on page 4, for example, G, used to say within 30 days. You switched it to 10, you put a line through 30, and you hyphenated the 3 and made 10, right? Because it looked like 310 at first.
Correct.
So you did-
You did not have the better part of the year to enroll.
So what's happened is there have been many people who have, myself have made suggested edits to this document, and that's what gets, I take blame for some of the edits and the strikeouts.
Like
because-
page 2, same thing. It looked like
Yeah,
it
it
said
is, yeah.
730 days and 1,400 days, but it's really edited out to say 10.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So quickly, second page, I think we're spelling out that coverage begins 30 days after hire, and that we'd like the paperwork in within the 14-day window. And again, we're inviting we're not discouraging anybody. Nobody's not going to get coverage. We're delineating when we need the paperwork so that things go smoothly. The second portion of that, the 10 days, nobody gets married, nobody goes to Las Vegas, children don't appear, so reasonably, a qualifying event is predictable within 10 days.
Speak for yourself.
So that's a good thing. The third page, we've included the administrative fee for Cobra, and that's pretty standard. I believe it's a 2%. It's set by law, and it's almost our cost to carry. We're performing an administrative service for someone who's no longer an employee. So
I don't have any problem with any changes you made.
Okay,
I really, and
good.
I went through them in the document that we got by email.
I would strongly encourage anybody at home that works for the town watching, or they really need to read this, because there's a lot of changes if someone becomes divorced, for example, or someone remarries after they've separated, some of those so-called life qualifying events. I just encourage.
At the end of the day, this is sort of a best practices moving forward, and it's been memorialized. At no point do I have any leverage raising my hand saying, well, this is how we do it. We've got this spelled out now, and we have our roadmap.
So this is the final, it says draft, but this will be basically the final document.
This will be the final document.
Is it?
We have the highlights, just,
To show us what the changes were. Okay.
and my favorite C word, compliance. You know, we're dovetailing into what the trust does, and things run well. So,
Perfect.
And again, to beat the drum, we want to overkill in terms of establishing what the employee's obligations are.
Correct.
Because in the absence of written direction, they will assume that we will be responsible. And we would like to be responsible, but in some instances, the employee has an obligation.
But again, this will be basically provided to them upon employment, right? The information,
Right.
I mean, it's available now, and anybody who works for the town, but
Yeah, so what we'll do is,
Lions would get it.
you know, I would presume we'll update this and distribute it out to our employees as a fair way to do it.
Mr. Chairman?
Department heads know to
Put it on
send,
put it on the town's website so people can see it.
department heads know any questions, send them to Rich's office.
Yep.
And if not, you.
It's,
got it.
I think it was a good effort. Rich, myself, and others had input into this, and so
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Ruda.
I'll make a motion that the board vote to adopt Mass General Law, Chapter 32B, subsection 21 through 23, regarding the town's health insurance policy, and to approve the health
Update-
insurance notification letter / update
I'll do them both.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
as presented here tonight.
Motion made.
Okay.
Motion made.
Second.
And seconded. Any further questions for the treasurer or the administrator? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
excellent. Can I have a quick point of clarification? Back to our regulations and our guidelines here. The Worcester Regional Retirement System operates independently. We are a member unit. The Hampshire Council of Governments Insurance Trust, we are a member unit. The two are independent. If you are a full-time employee, you are required to enroll in the Worcester Regional Retirement System. You vest after 10 years. Hampshire Council of Governments Insurance Trust provides health insurance. We buy it through a joint purchase agreement. After being a full-time employee for 10 years, you're vested. So you could walk away from the town of Dudley and pursue another endeavor. You could go to another town, or you could start your own business. You could sit on the couch and watch TV. Once you've earned that pension is yours after 10 years, okay? You grow by years of service, but not by any earnings. That's yours. If you've separated from service after you've had your 10 years with the town of Dudley, your health insurance does not become a portable benefit. If you're no longer a full-time employee and separated from service and have not retired, you don't take the health insurance with you. I think there was some confusion at one point that after 10 years you had health insurance to take with you, much as a future superannuation benefit from the retirement system. So for clarification, you could very well work 10 years for the town of Dudley and earn that superannuation benefit to be drawn at any time. You need 10 years, you need to be 55, unless, of course, it's an involuntary retirement, an accidental retirement, something like that. So there was some confusion, and I do want everybody to know that nothing we've done in here would have created anything like that. The retirement system sort of works on its own, and at no point could somebody have worked 10 years and had a portable health insurance that they could have taken with them.
They just get a COBRA benefit if they're not retired.
Well, of
if they pay.
course, and that's, the COBRA benefits are driven externally from this document. It's set federal statute.
Right,
so,
different. That's only temporary, that's only a
That's temporary, that's to make sure that there's no lapse in coverage. You would leave here, you would find your next job, and that intermediate spread would just be covered.
Okay.
So thank you.
So that's only of import to town employees.
Correct.
So my question is, how is that information shared with them? In what form? And when is that information shared?
Probably, I would think when they come in and they think that they're gonna get insurance, but if they're, like Rich said, they haven't reached that retirement age.
Oh, wait a minute now. We must have had a problem if a town employee did not know this. So my question is, how do we tell them clearly that retirement board is entirely separate and does not include, after 10 years, taking your health insurance? How and when do we inform them of that?
May I? I'm mentally going through the personnel handbook that says 20-hour-a-week employees receive health insurance. There really isn't anything that would make a statement that says this is true or this isn't. I would say your Worcester Regional Retirement enrollment paperwork would say, as a retiree, you need to hit these qualifications, and your health insurance would be provided to you, provided that your city or town has adopted 32B. So I think people have inserted something there. I don't think there's a promise anywhere in a contract that obligated the town.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that the town administrator determine, and by whatever means and whatever help he deems necessary, to make sure that new and current employees clearly understand what apparently one town employee did not understand recently. That's all.
Yeah, Paul, so like I said, we want to distribute this, and the question of taking benefits with you when you retire, I think that's pretty much addressed on page 2B. You look at B, Paul, in the policy, it talks about what Rich just spoke about. So Rich said about retirees taking benefits with them, health benefits with them when they retire, then it's not a portable benefit. If you don't elect health insurance benefit at the time of retirement, you will not be allowed back onto the plan after the date of retirement. That's pretty clear in terms of what our policy is.
Okay, so this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a 9-page document. Is there some way that we could state it in the personnel handbook that wouldn't take up 9 pages? Just to draw their attention to it?
How about Greg, take a look at that, see if you can come up with something, and report back.
Yeah.
In conjunction with everybody else.
I'd interject and say that we're spelling out as many things as we can to avoid an issue. If you were to put a line in a contract or in the personnel handbook that says, please refer to this document regarding your eligibility for employment and post-employment benefits.
Yeah, we'll just, you know,
I don't agree.
We spell out things.
I don't
so-
agree. I'm gonna tell you why I don't agree. Being the age I am and going through the things I've recently gone through and getting referred from one agency to another, to this paragraph, to that document, to a statement somebody made that was different, that's not the way you help people. The way you help people is you give them a document that has simple, declarative statements that are understood. That's all I'm asking for.
Okay, well,
I'm not asking to refer them to a 9-page document. That's bull.
Well, I disagree. I think that these 9 pages read a lot better than what's listed in other places. I think this is pretty straightforward, and this is to eliminate the headache from the 1%.
well,
Rich, I'm sorry. This is a 9-page straightforward statement.
Yes.
What I'm saying is, put a line in the handbook that might be, or put a statement in the handbook that's 2 or 3 lines, and not refer them to a 9-page document. Sorry.
If we do that, we're going to miss something. The document that I recently got from my health insurance employer about my health insurance from my employer, it was a book, it was bound, and it had nothing to do with what I was covered for or what. It was all about what happens if you separate from the company, what happens if you get married, what happens if you have a child. I mean, it was, I'm gonna guess 60 to 70 pages. I'd be afraid if we did something, Paul, that was a few sentences, we'd miss something, and someone would find that one thing we missed. I'd rather have everything than not have everything.
Okay, I would prefer to make the statement in 2 or 3 sentences, and then say, if you want to research or know more about this, refer to this document. But I wouldn't just say, if you want to know, refer to this document. I'd say, here's the policy in 3 sentences. And if you want to know more, go to this document.
all right, so I think the best course, we have the motion.
Fair.
Take a vote, and after the vote, we have the town administrator, in conjunction with Rich, and any suggestions you want to email Paul, come up with the best language, terminology, location to alleviate Paul's concerns.
Understood.
Good?
It's a good compromise.
Motion made and seconded to accept presented tonight. Any further questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Boyle, thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Chair will entertain a motion for the Clarinda Wood Fund in the amount of $467. Moved by
Second.
Mr. Joseph, second by Mr. Ruda. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Fire Department call volume increase. Chief Kochanowski.
You guys have this packet, have
We
this in
do.
your packet.
Yeah.
I've been doing this every year for the last couple of years. This is just more of an informational thing. We do the 5 and 10-year breakdown, and these spreadsheets will also appear in my annual report. I just wanted to show the increases we've had over the 5 and 10-year period. Was the 5-year increase was 29% total, and just under 15% for the 10-year increase. But the more important one is the front page, which was the increase from last year to this year. Well, 2017 to 2018, and fire calls were up 14%, EMS just over 2%, and the total was up almost 6%. So some pretty significant increases.
Chief, that includes all mutual aid calls and
It's everything,
everything you guys respond to.
yeah.
All right.
The only thing that I would note was there was a big swing between 2012 and 2013, but I believe that was the same time period that we implemented the in-house EMS, so we gained back a lot of calls that we were losing to mutual aid.
Yep.
Well, you're looking at about 60 calls a day for one reason or another.
Yeah.
You know, almost 2,000 calls, total responses, 365 days,
Six calls.
six calls a day
Six.
for either a fire or EMS.
Well, these are just fire and EMS as well. I mean, inspections also count for a call of for service, and I didn't even include those on this particular sheet. They do appear on another sheet in the annual report, but we're doing between 250 and 300 inspections a year as well, too, so.
Any questions for the chief on the document provided?
Chief, without asking you to go back and break everything down, Nichols is not, how many calls do we do at Nichols?
I don't have
Off the top of your head.
particular number, but it's probably about 2%, maybe a little less than 2%.
Very
It's not
small
as much-
percentage of the number of calls.
It's not as
we
much
have.
as everybody thinks it is. It does go through spurts where it seems like we'll have a big cluster of calls up there, and then it'll go dormant for a while, and I'm not just talking on the off-season, I'm talking during the school year. It's up and down, and it's different from year to year, but overall, it's about probably maybe less, a little under 2% of our call volume.
Okay.
Chief, any way you get this information out on the website or out Twitter, from whatever you guys?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna post it, but it's also gonna appear in the annual town report. I put it in every year. Again, I wanted to bring it to your attention because it's something I've done for the last couple years, 2 or 3 years, just to show that we have had an increase. We do have an increasing elderly population. I really can't give a reason for the increase in fires. It's just something that's happened. Just see where it goes.
When did you start here?
2011.
Those are significant 5-year increases.
Well, like I said, I think a lot of it's, I mean, a lot of it's the EMS. We were giving a lot away around that time to area communities when they couldn't cover the calls. And I had shown that throughout the years too with other spreadsheets when we were going for the per diem EMS shifts.
Are we at any kind of saturation point in terms of how long it takes to do a call, do the paperwork, come back, et cetera?
What do you mean?
Saturation meaning it's pretty much a good portion of any given workday tied up between responding to a call, attending at the call, coming back, doing whatever paperwork is necessary. Is that saturation means, are we filling up a day?
Yeah,
Days?
most days, yeah. I mean, if we're not doing a call, I mean, because you can't predict the calls, we're doing inspections, which isn't even on here. But it would depend on the call. It depends where we transport the person to. It depends on the nature of the call, what type of call, things of that. I mean, some calls you can do and have a pretty quick turnaround. Other calls take a couple hours, depending on what it is.
I know that we get data about the calls. Sometimes they don't want to be transported, et cetera. But on this, I'm not necessarily wanting you to go back 5 or 10 years. But even if we just did last year to this year, I'd like to see the total activity in a document that we can throw up onto our website that includes the inspections. Just the total number of activities.
But I do that when you have that information on the monthly report every month.
We do.
Right, and you let me finish. We can put that on the website. We can post, it's a single sheet, as you know, so we can just post that on the website.
That would be fine, and I'd like to see a copy of what the condensed info data is that you put, just a copy, snapshot of what it is you're going to put on the website in terms of activities, because I think that it's increased dramatically overall. That's all.
Okay.
Want to do report 2 while you're up here? You want to wait and do it later?
I don't have anything. I'm good.
Student rep's not here. We'll hold off on board members. Departmental communications, we can hold off on. Which brings us back, I appreciate everyone allowing us to get this stuff out of the way. Brings us back to what would have been Public Business A, presentation by Municipal Resources, Inc., presentation on highway, water, sewer management study. At this time, I will call up the gentleman from Municipal Resources to come on up, introduce themselves to the people.
Good evening.
Good to see you again.
Gentlemen, good evening.
Polls tonight?
Yeah.
Trust me, where Buzz and I come from, it's the same discussion in so many communities.
Double polls.
You weren't here when the lady left in tears one night.
Yeah,
Kind of felt bad.
and then the guy left in
And
tears.
the guy left pretty upset, too.
That's why we had a new
He didn't
guy.
take his hat off.
No, wouldn't take his hat off. So I'm gonna like just Greg do a brief introduction, then we'll turn it to you gentlemen, introduce yourselves to those that don't know who you are. I'll turn it
So, the board had asked, that we look at a, management review of the highway and water and sewer departments. And the primary reason for doing so is, the long-term superintendents in each of those departments had retired. And we wish to, bring in an independent, unbiased source to take a look at the departments from top to bottom, and make best practice recommendations on what they thought was appropriate for the future organizational structure of the department. We did not tell them what we were looking for. We wanted to have them, give them free rein to look at each of the departments, talk to the people that were in those departments, and come back to the selectmen with some recommendations. And that's what the purpose of tonight's meeting was. We did do a procurement, so we just didn't go and hire these guys. We go through a competitive procurement process. As a result of that, we identified the most qualified vendor, which was MRI, and we contracted with them to perform the services of the study. Gave them a deadline, which they met, was to complete the report by the end of the calendar year, which you have in front of you. And one of the obligations that they have is to come in and meet with the board and answer any questions that you or the public may have relative to their recommendations. The report, if you go through it, talks about a lot of different things, and I'm sure the time doesn't permit to go through every single item of those this evening. One thing that I did inform the board of is going forward, we'll have to consult with council. If we wish to look at recommendations, how do we adopt those recommendations? That's a question that we need to have with council, not necessarily with the two gentlemen that are here this evening.
After they do the introductions, I'd like to slide in.
So gentlemen, take a moment to introduce yourselves. You can give us a quick synopsis.
Happy to do that. This is a copy of our agenda for tonight's discussion. It's actually handed out to a few folks and handed out to people who are here. We have,
Is there any for the people that are in the back, Buzz? Do you want to hand it out or no?
I have some.
You got a few
That
of
would be
them.
fine, yeah. I'm Buzz Stapchinsky, and my colleague is Bob Mercier. We're with Human Resources, we're with Municipal Resources, Inc. Municipal Resources, Inc. is out of Meredith, New Hampshire, although Bob and I are based out of Massachusetts here. MRI's been in the consulting business, municipal consulting business for pretty close to 40 years. We do all manner of municipal consulting, from the kind of study that you folks had in mind that we conducted for you. We do recruitments and selections for police chiefs, fire chiefs, assessment centers, that kind of thing, town managers, town administrators, DPW directors, finance directors, do pay and classification studies, all manner of municipal management kinds of activities that our clients are looking for. And we were happy to win this engagement and enjoyed working here. And what you should know about us is that Bob has pretty close to 40 years of municipal experience as a manager in Burlington and in Billerica. And I have about 40 years of experience in municipal management, having served as town manager in both Wilmington, Massachusetts, and most recently Andover, Massachusetts. We've done, again, like I say, studies of this nature, capital improvement plans, you name it. Bob and I have worked together for 3 years on a variety of engagements. In this particular project, the title is the Highway, Water and Sewer Organizational Assessment our presentation today. We're going to try to give you a high-level presentation because the report that you have is pretty close to 75 pages long, including the addendum. So we did quite a bit of work. We're not going to get into the specific weeds unless you want us to, but we want to give you a broad overview of what we found in terms of our assessment.
Can I interrupt? May I, Buzz?
Certainly.
Mr. Chan, I gotta tell you, I've taken a lot of postgraduate and graduate courses and practicums on organizational management, methodologies, and techniques of solving problems. And I gotta tell you that at home, I printed out the first report, the draft, and then I looked at the final. There's not much difference between the two. But I read that thing like it was a dime novel. I couldn't put it down. All right? And I did read it all through in one day, and then thinking that maybe I was bleary-eyed, I waited a couple days and read it again, and it read just as well. I want you to know that I am extremely impressed, extraordinarily impressed with the scope of what you did, the sequence of what you did, and the methodology, both macro and micro methodology. It's extraordinarily impressive. I do want to point out that there were a couple minor things that, you know, I wouldn't even get a bloody nose over in terms of your conclusions and recommendations. I would draw your attention to your outline and number 7, which are the next steps. And I think that the first next step would be a series of public hearings to explain the conclusion, how you got to the conclusions, rather than to do that tonight. I think you ought to have copies available for people once we accept this document, and then we need to have public hearings. That's number 1 under point 7. Because they're gonna have to vote to approve this or not. Right? And they're gonna, we might just have a couple of public sessions to do so. Greg will tell us what we've got best for a timeline. But I'm anxious to get this before the people in a sit-down, no-tie, face-to-face to answer their questions about it, because that's gonna get us what we need, the support, to do what the board will ultimately make a decision to do, and I don't know what that is at this point. Okay?
All right.
So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Yeah, thank you for the compliment. But I think this shows the strength that Bob and I bring to the project, having looked at a number of municipalities in these kinds of situations, having experienced it ourselves and our own communities that we've worked in, and also, you know, the breadth and the depth of MRI, the people that we draw on to help us with these kinds of projects. So, thank you, sir. So if you don't mind, I'd like to jump into our
Everybody okay? Everybody ready?
let's say,
I'm good. Let's
10,000
go.
foot view. All right, so, our assessment was very interesting. We talked to a number of people. We talked to representatives of the Board of Selectmen, the Water and Sewer Commissioners, employees. We talked to Rich, we talked to your town accountant, we talked to your financial advisor, we talked to our contacts at the Department of Revenue, just to get an underlying basis of the issues that might exist in this community with regards to, one, financial stability, but also issues relative to water and sewer, to the enterprise fund, to the funding for town departments, that kind of thing, to make sure that we were on talking about a community that's on, solid financial ground. And we found that you are. We looked at best practices. That's one of the appendix in here. We always start off with best practices. We want to see how a municipality, doesn't matter the size, doesn't matter the population, how they compare against some of the best management practices. And so we looked at best management practices for highway, best management practices for, I'll call them the other functions. That's the cemetery, parks, grounds, buildings, tree, that sort of thing. And then for water and sewer. And as you'll note, and as we noted, you folks, for your size and the depth and the breadth of your budget, have hit a number of best practices. So we didn't find what you'd say of the huge amount of deficiencies. You know, we didn't find deficiencies per se. You got an enterprise fund, your fees seem to be pretty good. Your costs relative to your comparables, you're right in there, maybe a little on the lower side, but there are no red herrings per se. What we found are opportunities, and that's what I think we're gonna get into today. So we start off the report with an executive summary, kind of a high-level review, and we come to the conclusion pretty darn quick that the well, let me just go back. Let me just talk about our process before our conclusion. So in our process, we had, as I said, meetings, interviews with folks, spent a couple of days doing that, looked at your website, looked at other municipalities' websites in terms of comparables. I think it's significant in terms of what this community has done is the October town meeting, where you strengthen, by way of a bylaw, the role and the authority of the town administrator. That, I think that's significant in going forward. Our recommendations were based on really sort of three things, three themes: responsibility, accountability, and best practices. I want to make sure that the responsibilities are defined, that the accountability is there, and that best practices are being met. To get to the proverbial bottom line, what we saw here was an opportunity because of three key management vacancies. We see an opportunity to look towards the consolidation of what I'll call a formal DPW, made up of highway, water, sewer, tree, parks and grounds, cemetery,
Recycling.
Recycling. Thank you, sir. Recycling. And that opportunity, as consultants, we couldn't bypass. It's as obvious to us as it is probably to you folks that you have some opportunities here. And what we did was we looked at our recommendations and we categorized them in four major groups. So we'll get into those in a few minutes. But we looked at management systems, preventive maintenance, financial management, and organizational systems. Those are those are the four horsemen, let's say, the four pillars that any good municipality has to consider when developing a department or reorganizing or pulling things together or consolidating in this case. So with that in mind, I'll just really stop my little speech here and pass things over to Bob, where he'll talk about the management systems and preventive maintenance.
Thank you, Buzz. Just to give you a little furtherance to a little bit of my background, as Buzz suggested, I retired out of Burlington. I was in Billerica. You would sense that those are fairly large towns. Burlington's probably 27,000. You would think it's a heck of a lot more if you drive by Burlington. Billerica was a big town, area-wise and population, almost 40 square miles, 44,000 people. But I also served in Boxborough, as an interim for 6 or 8 months. That's a town of about 4,000 people. I served as an interim after I retired in Wayland, which is a town of about 12 or 13,000 people. So I've got the breadth from the larger towns to the smaller towns, and every iteration of the structure of those towns is different. They're not clones of what Dudley does, or they're not clones of what Burlington does. Every one of them is different, as are you, and unique in a lot of respects. So just wanted to give you that perspective from us as managers, professional managers. We've seen the large, we've seen the small, we've seen all the different iterations and variations as to how towns structure themselves. So to the 4 points that Buzz talked about, the management systems, that is clearly one of those functions that we feel is so important as you think about consolidating into a public works department. And the premise of us suggesting that now's the opportune time for Dudley to look at that is what Buzz talked about, and the vacancies you currently have, and the potential structuring or restructuring you could do because of those vacancies. So this is an opportune time. But what is that, and why did we arrive at the premise that a public works, a unified public works department will work for you? We came down after all of our analysis to this point, and it's on page 7 in the executive summary. Effective fiscal planning and management, as well as policy development and implementation, require greater centralization of responsibility and accountability into a consolidated public works department. The town government would act cohesively in order to serve its constituencies well. And that's the basic premise we used. We're not saying you're doing things wrong. We're not saying there are problems in this community, but this is an opportunity for you to take advantage of systems that are in place today that weren't in place, frankly, 15, 20, 10 years ago. You have opportunities to engage yourself in those new management systems that are available to your people if you go down that route that we're proposing. Clearly, on management systems, if you adopt good, solid management systems under a singular authority, you provide efficiencies, accountability, management span of control on all what Buzz and I would call public works functions, be that water, be that cemetery, be that highway, whatever it happens to be. They're literally public works functions. So that's the management system component that we've talked about in a lot greater detail. We also talked about, I'm just going to talk about a few of those things. There are more details, and probably 6 or 8 of them under management systems. But asset management, critically important in any town, in any community, but particularly effective in public works. And you don't have a systemized system in place for asset management, again, that's not a criticism. You're a very small town. You operate by rubbing nickels together, and we get that, and you do a very good job at doing it the way you're doing it currently. But there are, again, the term opportunities are out there. So when we talk about asset management, as I've said, we've seen a lot of documentations, and I'll echo Buzz, all of your people were terrific, very cooperative with us. Nobody was hiding things. We were trying to be as transparent as possible with people. We came in with no agenda. We just wanted information, and everybody provided it. So to that, we thank Greg. We thank all of the folks who dealt with us individually. But we didn't find a single document identifying all your town assets, whether or not it's the vehicles or your buildings or the pipes in the ground or your roadway. I know you have a modified, or a modest, I should say, pavement management program. There are things you can improve upon, and it's all in the study that we talked about. But that's your asset management deficiency, if you will. And then we had planning and coordination. There's no question in our mind that a singular organization for public works provides you with the opportunity to really do some long-range planning, strategic planning, responsibility, and have responsibility in a singular entity, whatever you want to ultimately determine that is. And that is important for communities going forward. You've taken those courses going forward. It's critical that people start to think ahead and really kind of outline where they're going to be going. And that planning structure would take place under a Public Works with the input from the Board of Selectmen, with the input from the Water and Sewer Commissioners, because they serve an important role here, and you'll notice at the end of the day, we talk about keeping them as separately elected Water and Sewer Commissioners in charge of policy for that department, not operations. Operations goes within the rubric of the Public Works Department, but we can get into that further. So that's my comments on those two major sections, management systems and asset management and planning and coordination.
All right, and I'll talk about financial management and organization system. With regards to financial management, your folks do look at your water and sewer rates on an annual basis or as needed, and that's a good practice. What we found is that your rates relative to the comparables are on the low side. And not only, well, we say rates, but the average bill for 120, 100 cubic feet relative to other communities is on the low side. But they do look at that, and they do keep them up to date. Same thing with your recycling. Your recycling fees, I know that they get looked at occasionally. The cemetery, I'm not so sure about the cemetery fees, looking at cemetery fees relative to other communities. I think something could be done there. But the rates that you charge need to be reviewed on an annual basis. The Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund, as I mentioned before, you need to be commended for having a Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund that does have free cash, or in this case, it's called retained earnings, at the end of the year. That's important. It's important to run, obviously, the program on a way that you're not in a deficit spending situation. What we are concerned about was the last time you had a study of the direct and indirect costs. It goes back 18 or 19 years, 2000. Looks like the Department of Revenue came in, Division of Local Services, and did a study for you folks. We would recommend you have that looked at again. The direct and indirect costs that go into an enterprise fund are something that you really periodically need a look, and 18, 19 years is a long period of time not to have them looked at. In terms of organizational systems, your organization works now. We're not saying it doesn't work. Snow gets addressed, potholes get filled, work gets done on a day-to-day basis, to the credit of the leadership that you have. What we're suggesting is that there could be better utilization of the staff that you have. Again, not to harp on the 3 management vacancies, but this is an opportunity. It's also an opportunity with the consolidated department to look at cross-training, to look at other training opportunities, so that the staff can be better coordinated with all 21 individuals. You're between your water, sewer, recycling, highway, et cetera. You're looking at 21 positions. 18 are filled, 3 are vacant. But with 18 or 21, you're pretty much at an acceptable point amongst your comparables. I think the comparables we looked at for water, sewer, highway, we're about 20. You've got to be careful when you look at your comparables, because your neighbors over here down the road, Webster, have a very large sewer operation, and that skews some of the numbers. So you've kind of got to take Webster out of the mix for some of these comparables because of what they provide. Now, in going forward with a consolidated department, one of the things that we would think you need to look at is the pay and classification of the employees going forward. I'm not saying they're good or bad now. We did hear some rumblings from some of the employees about some perhaps pay inequities between water and sewer and highway, and it gets into an interesting mix with regards to licenses that people have, licenses they don't have. It is something that should be looked at in terms of updating job descriptions and pay and classification plans. me see, I think, Mr. Mercier?
Yes, and
You're
if
up
I could, Mr. Chair, just go back to one of our four major items that we talked about. I skipped over the whole preventive maintenance, which I think is an important component for you guys to look at going forward. We talked to everybody, and you've got issues going forward. Everybody, as I mentioned, in both Buzz and I's opinion, was very upfront with us, talking to us about their current situation, what they do in terms of preventive maintenance. And basically, you guys are holding things together with some gum and some tape. And you're doing a good job on that. But that ultimately, at some point, is gonna come back to bite you. Your infrastructure in place is getting older. You all know this. The water and sewer folks were very upfront with us about some of the conditions of the pipes, the AC pipes that need to be replaced, the sewer system itself, and the pumping station potential upgrades, and they're tackling some of that now through some capital improvements and those type of things. But those are major issues coming at you as you look down the road a bit. Your vehicle maintenance seems to be in decent shape, but we would like to see a more robust preventive maintenance for all of your vehicle equipment, and we got all of those schedules from Rich and the insurance folks, so we know what you have. We put it in the book, so you guys know what you have. But a more systemic replacement of, each department has their replacement schedules, but something should be consolidated with respect to public works equipment and what should be replaced, what shouldn't be replaced, priorities placed on whatever it happens to be, a dump truck for highway versus a pickup truck for water and sewer. Somebody needs to make those type of decisions with a consolidated department. So, you know, the I&I issue, we know the water and sewer has got that they've got to deal with. We saw the letter. We know Greg shared the letter with us. We know what's going on with that. That's not atypical. Both Buzz and I dealt with I&I issues in our communities. In Burlington, I was under an order to fix it. So I get it. We know what that's all about. And from the DEP's perspective, you just need to show them that you're acknowledging that it's there, and you've got a plan of action to deal with it. So all of that in terms of preventive maintenance, that would be under the rubric of what we call preventive maintenance going forward. Your buildings seem to be in decent shape. You've got people who are doing yeoman work with very little resources. This building is an example of the condition of your facility, so we think you're on the right track there. But again, in a singular document, you can see that over a 5 or 10 year schedule for the entire department. So that's what we're suggesting on preventive maintenance. And Buzz, I go back to you, or does it come back to me?
You're up now on the proposed.
Public Works, a Public Works Department. This discussion starts on page 33. Again, I'm not going to go into a heck of a lot of detail, but it just outlines some of the things that Paul, to you, mentioned, the methodology we use going forward to talk about it, and what we're essentially saying, if you choose to go in this direction, and you go in the direction of a consolidated public works with a director, all of the current daily operations for highway, water, sewer, recycling, buildings, grounds, other public works operational units form into a single authority. That not only includes those things you know about, but that includes any and all special projects that would typically be called public works. That's your dam restoration stuff, your stormwater management, which is another one of those issues that's percolating out there on everybody's radar screen, which is a difficult one. And you may be surprised at this, but a very expensive issue to deal with going forward. So a Public Works Director would be responsible for all that, your street lights, your GIS integration at some point. And again, some of this is futuristic thinking with your GIS, but it's clearly the direction that most towns are moving into with GIS compatibilities. And I know it's a cost item. We get all that. We're just suggesting that it's something that is a very, very useful tool for a public works operation. I think both Buzz and I had them in our communities, and it's also advantageous for residents, by the way. Most towns make their GIS systems available to residents, so it's a good thing. In addition to that, you would have a uniform approach to evaluating all project costs. a tracking of citizen complaints by division, staffing needs, resource sharing, project management, maintaining town assets both above and below the ground, establishing an annual budget and funding priorities for public works functions, as well as researching costs and benefits of outsourcing some of these tasks and functions. So that's the issue with a public works department. In going forward, I think I'm good.
All right. One of the things we noted in terms of a capital improvement plan is that the departments have ideas on what's needed. They may have a capital improvement program that they take to the capital improvement planning committee. But we would recommend a strong and a formal annual capital improvement plan. And these documents are typically developed every year. They're updated every year. They're 5 years in length. Some of them, some towns look at maybe a 5 or a 10-year, 15-year look ahead, so that the community has an idea of what things may be coming up. But in terms of focus, your focus is really on the first year, the second year, 5 years out max. We would recommend that kind of document. And it would give you folks, as the policymakers of the community, the vision of what's out there, so you can plan the finances for it. So you can look at how best to sequence these acquisitions by way of either the operating budget, the capital budget, by way of working with the water and sewer commissioners, or by way of their enterprise fund, or their retained earnings, or grants, or other opportunities that may come up by way of betterments or private developers contributing when they're doing work in the community in terms of infrastructure improvements that they may need. So Bob and I are both big on a formal capital improvement plan. It's a piece of work. It's not easy to do, but it will give you an idea. And if you don't plan these things, then then you're going to be surprised when they pop up, and the police chief, fire chief, DPW director comes up and says, "Oh, by the way, we have this emergency." You'll have emergencies, but we try to, by way of a capital improvement plan, look at what's the most obvious kinds of things and the sequence for their replacement. So in terms of, that's one of our priorities really, is a capital improvement plan that would be for the whole merged DPW. In terms of...
And Buzz, if I could, just to comment on that, we think that that's an important tool and document for the town to use. And we're focused on the public works and all of the operations within public works. But clearly, a town-wide CIP really makes very good sense for everybody. Then everybody, whether or not it's a school issue or a police car or a fire engine, whatever it happens to be, is also plugged into that schedule. So that, and then you, as the executive body in town, and ultimately town meeting, decide where our priorities are going to be. And everybody sees the big picture, so that you're not dealing with an individual department coming to town and saying, I need this, and it's very important to us, and the other department sitting over here saying, well, I got something that's pretty important too, but nobody's really paying attention to me. So it's, in a broader scale, as you think about some of these ideas and concepts, it's clearly important to expand upon a CIP, develop it for public works if you go in that direction, but also expand upon it to include the entire town.
Thank you. As part of our study, we took the liberty of looking at your existing organizational structure for water, sewer, and highway, et cetera. And we've proposed a organization plan going forward of a consolidated department. Now, as I said before, you have 21 positions, 18 are filled, 3 are vacant. And what we're proposing is, in our plan, would be taking the vacant highway superintendent position and developing a director of DPW, taking the water and sewer superintendent vacancy and making that a water and sewer general foreman, and then taking the highway foreman position and making that a highway general foreman. So you'd have a director and a general foreman over water and sewer, and a general foreman over highway and the ancillary functions. And if you look at the span of control issues within each of those two, let's say, divisions within within the Department of Public Works, the span of control is very reasonable for an organization of this size. What we did do in our organization chart is we put in a box for the future, an engineering function, an engineering section at some point, whether it's something you want to do or not. Typically, a Department of Public Works would include engineering. We also did show that we included dams and the street lights. Oh, by the way, I have to commend you. Your street light program, obviously, is excellent. And stormwater. Bob did talk about stormwater. One of the things that you should be aware of with stormwater is some communities are developing a stormwater fee because it's, as Bob alluded to, stormwater management is going to be is a big problem for a lot of municipalities today. And some of the progressive municipalities that we're aware of are have developed a fee structure to pay for some of the stormwater improvements that the feds and the state is requiring today. So just a word to the wise, word to the future, that is something we're seeing out there.
But Buzz, and to just echo what Buzz said, we are very nervous about the stormwater management. I know we all got hit with the notices that came out and what your responsibilities are, and he's absolutely right. There are some communities, and we're not advocating it, I never did it, that are charging individual homeowners fees because of the stormwater obligations going forward and the discharges and all that kind of stuff. We wouldn't recommend that. But think about that in your community for a minute, as that becomes more and more of an issue, and you deal with what the Water and Sewer Commissioners have been telling us about the pipes in the ground and the deterioration there and the problems with AC piping.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Say again?
Can I interrupt for a
Sure.
second?
Yeah.
I think it's today's paper, Shrewsbury, I believe is looking at stormwater fees. The question I have is simple. Would revenue collected for stormwater fees also go into a fund that could only be used for stormwater?
It depends on how you want to set it up. You could, some towns are setting, I think Reading set it up as a revolving account to deal with the costs that you're talking about, to support remedying the stormwater management issue. It depends on what you want to do with that. And again, I'm not advocating for fees or not fees. That's something you should
Oh, we understand
think
that.
about.
We understand that.
Yeah.
All right? But it could be established just for that.
Yes, yes.
And
purpose.
I think that's the right way to do it. So you take it off, you take that obligation off the tax rate, off the taxpayer per se, and you have a designated fee for a designated purpose.
Okay, thank you.
But again, just put in a plug for the MMA annual meeting. If any of you are going to the MMA annual meeting this weekend, I'm sure this will be a timely topic at one of the workshops or one of the seminars, because every municipality is dealing with it. Massachusetts is a very wet state, and the stormwater is a common problem.
So I think, Mr. Chairman, because we heard Paul, and we're not sure what you want to do with next steps, if you don't want us to go into that, because that's really almost an implementation that we suggest. I don't know if you're ready for that, I'm not sure you are, but it's in the document, and anybody who wants to see what we suggest as a roadmap is there. But you obviously haven't made any decisions going forward on that, so.
Correct. If I may, just to wrap up a comment, Bob had mentioned about the Water and Sewer Commissioners. You know, we are recommending in our study, in our report, that, as Bob said, the Water and Sewer Commissioners remain as elected, as advisory to town meeting, to the Board of Selectmen, to the town administrator, and that they have an important role in the setting of the water and sewer rates, in dealing with abatements, betterments, that sort of thing that go into that are involved with water and sewer expansion, to bring water and sewer issues to this room, to the table of the Board of Selectmen, so that you know what the issues are in town with respect to, to the I&I, to sewer, various sewer issues, water issues, that sort of thing.
Well, I thought that you used the phrase that they would still be policymakers for
Right.
sewer and water.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
We did. We think, and we reviewed a lot, and again, in cooperation with the Water and Sewer Commissions, they gave us a lot of information. They do a lot of good things. And as Buzz suggested in our comparables, they're trying to keep you consistent with neighboring communities and what you're charging. It can be tweaked a little bit here and there, but they do a good job on that. In terms of policy, they have talked about some of the areas, I think Mason Road comes to mind, that really needs some work. But the focal point in all of this, if you go forward with what we're suggesting, is going to be your Public Works Director, who's going to be working with Greg, with you, with the Water and Sewer Commissioners, all these major issues that you're all dealing with. So that's the communication link that, if you decide to go that route, would happen. Paul, to your question, the operational functions would remain with a Public Works Director.
So with that, you want to talk about next steps?
I think they want to I don't know. It's up to you, Steve. What would you want to do?
What do you guys want?
You want the whole apple or half of it?
So, Mr. Chairman, through you, what's your availability to a larger hearing going forward? If we posted a few hearings, would you be here and available in your contract to answer questions from the public?
I'd have to look at that. I'm sure we could, John. We just have to look at the contract and all that kind of stuff. But, and look, Buzz and I consider you our clients. We do what's necessary to make it happen, whatever you're our clients.
So, obviously, water sewer's here, and I'm sure they may want to speak. General synopsis of what you came up with is to move us forward into the 21st century and looking at the opportunities based on the vacancies, not so much the work being done, but the organizational structure based on the vacancies, and most communities are trending towards what you propose, or already there.
I think you stated it well. Most communities that we've worked with have developed some kind of Department of Public Works that are along the lines of what we're recommending.
And Steve, it all works. It's what's right for Dudley. I'll give you a couple of examples. We just did the search for a Public Works Director in Rutland. Those of you familiar with Rutland, it's probably about 9,000 people, small community. They attracted an individual to be the first, it's not their first director, they've had a Public Works operation for quite some time. They attracted an individual, it's all public knowledge, they attracted an individual out of the Worcester, city of Worcester, Water and Sewer Department, who is a civil engineer, and is going to Rutland for a reasonable salary. It's not crazy. It's an individual who wants to take that next step. I don't have to tell you, Worcester's a pretty big operation with water and sewer. Had a tremendous skill set. Not necessarily highway, but we're not as concerned about that. You have good highway people in place. You don't need, anybody who just only knows highway. Your technical stuff from the water and sewer side, we thought was important for Rutland. They thought it was important for Rutland, and they just brought that individual on. They don't have a separately elected commission. And by the way, some towns have highway commissioners. This is New England, after all, and we all go through that. Concord, Mass. Very nice, well-established community, full-functioning community. We're doing the search for the new town manager, who's retiring after 20 years up there. They have a full-service public works. They've got water, sewer, they've got everything, highway, they've got everything. They also have a separately elected water and sewer commission, which does what we have suggested here, stay out of the operational side of it. There's a public works director, but you guys, not you, the selectmen, the water and sewer commissioners, set the rates, determine policy going forward, where are we expanding, where we're not expanding, what are the tie-in fees, all of that stuff is still done, and it runs very well. Very
So
well.
let me ask you a question based on your knowledge, experience, communities you work with, worked for, probably already got bids out. Is anybody going away from DPW? If they're an existing structure, is anybody going to what we have now?
Well, I'm not aware of any.
I think people talk about it all the time, smaller towns, not bigger towns. Bigger towns are really moving in the direction of professionalizing the entire department. And again, that's not a critique, it's just that they have the opportunity to do it. They have the resources to do it, which is always important, and they move in that direction. My town's Tingsboro, Massachusetts. We have a separate water commission, we have a separate sewer commission. We have selectmen, we have a highway department. I'm on a government study committee there. We're trying to consolidate a public works department up there. It's ongoing, it's in a lot of towns, most often towns under 15,000 that are having that discussion, and we get it. The Water and Sewer Commission, in any town, not just Dudley, they feel they have a good link to their customer base, and that's important for some people, that they retain that link, and we recognize that, and we say, it seems to work in Dudley, so let it continue to work. Let them set the rates, let them develop policy, but operationally, let a professional manager come in and run your public works department.
So I just want to hit on your report, which I agree with Paul. When I first got the email from Greg, read it, then we got the second one, I wanted to know if there was changes, basically it wasn't any. I hit the high points that I've been involved since 2001. There's some commissioners here that have been probably involved longer than me, employees longer than me. Highlight some of the high points of your study. It clearly spells out, as we know by law, retained earnings cannot be used.
Correct.
I want to say that again, because that's an ongoing theme
We emphasize that, Steve.
in social media by people that are involved in town government, that may be an elected commissioner,
Yeah.
that accuse other boards of financial mismanagement. This is not a grab for money. Water sewer retained earnings will remain water sewer retained earnings. Two, based on your experience and your report you generated, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're trying to trend Dudley in the same direction that a lot of other communities have chosen to go, or are already there. And three, we as a board, and I'm sure water sewer, Mr. Paletta is a highway superintendent, George is here, water sewer, it generally works. There's a high level of cooperation. You know, boards help each other out. We see a lot of interaction. But to progress to where we want to get, I think, or with your report, it just streamlines the structure. I challenge anyone that's negative before they even read this report to find me a business that doesn't have one person in charge. And that's what, at the end of the day, yes, we're running a service. We're a service-oriented business. I work for the post office. There's somebody in charge at the top. You know, we have local people that run our operations, whether it's the big city, whether it's a small town. But there's someone in charge that has to make the hard decisions. And that's all I see the study. Just validates some of the ideas and some of the things that this board has wanted to look at. And now is, like you said, now is the time where the 3 high-level management positions are covered by interims. Now would be the time, if the townspeople wanted to go forward.
The other
That's what I
thing,
see.
Steve, will just mention, and we're aware of it, we're cognizant of it. Look, some of this stuff, and we talked to Greg about it, some of this stuff is likely gonna involve some collective bargaining issues and that type. That's for you guys to figure out. We
Right.
acknowledge it, that there's gonna have to be some work done to deal with that.
Right, and in the big scheme of things, that's minor.
Well,
You know, my opinion would be, if we go to general form, and use your term, the only issue I could see would be a general foreman, a unionized position or not. Like a highway foreman came out of the union about 10, 12 years ago. Oh, wasn't it one time?
Nope.
Oh, never was it, okay, so never. I mean, that works.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot that works with the existing organization. I think the issue that we're finding is the opportunity and to look at how best to use the services of 21 positions.
You know, I'm not gonna speak for anybody, you know, Jonathan was a big advocate. He was on the, subcommittee there that met last met a couple of years ago, and we had water sewer in about a month or two back. And took a little back and forth, but everybody finally agreed that that committee left it that we were gonna bring an outside independent company in to do what you guys did. And wasn't a predetermined result, nobody sat down and said, this is where we wanna be at the end of this study. And I think it's a comprehensive document. I think you guys did an outstanding job. And I think it points out where we can make improvements.
Mr. Chairman, is this, through you, Greg, has this been released to the public yet?
No, we'll release it after tonight's meeting.
So I'll make a motion that the Board of Selectmen accept the titled Town of Dudley, Massachusetts Highway, Water, and Sewer Organizational Assessment Final Report dated December 2018, and make it available to the public online and in the office effective tomorrow morning.
Second.
Let me point out, Mr. Chairman, that I'm fine with this, with that motion, that the options are to accept or acknowledge receipt. Acknowledge receipt of is less committal than the motion or the use of the word to accept. And I just want to ask Jonathan if that's what you want. You want accept or acknowledge receipt of?
Yeah, I used the word accept on purpose.
Good. Okay. I'm in agreement with that.
All right, I'm gonna let the motion go, and then I'm gonna open up the comments in case other people have things they want to say. So at this time, the chair, we have a motion and a second to accept the report as titled. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Mr. Joseph?
I was surprised that the causal effect of why Dudley is doing many of the things informally that you have suggested could lead to a DPW. I was surprised only that the cause of that was not played up or acknowledged, and that is the fact that when Prop 2.5 went into effect, that Dudley had one of the lowest tax rates in the state, in the bottom 10 of 15, and we remain close to that position by the limitation of 2.5. So we were actually forced to learn how to cooperate and share and do some things informally due to that reason. And it's like people have come to accept the fact that we have to work together. And I think that's an important thing, that it was not forced on us, but we didn't have much of a choice, if you can understand that.
Yep. Yep.
It happened to all of us.
And by the way, did I hear a sales pitch in the stories of Rutland and Concord?
No. Those were only used as examples.
Okay.
So, call to a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to ask for a roll call vote and then record it as unanimous. I'm going to ask for request a roll call vote.
John Ruda, aye.
Steve Sullivan, aye.
Harry Sigenovich, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
All right, so I'll have, open up the comments from Mr. Fornia. Well, either way, you know how it works.
Tom Fournier, I was on that board to see about starting a DPW. Your statement was wrong. We did not leave that board with the okay to looking to hire an outside firm.
Then we need to clarify, because your other commissioners were here that night, one of your other commissioners was here with you that night, and he agreed with Mr. Marcy and Mr. Ruda that that was gonna be the next step.
He was not on the board. I was a member of that committee to look into the possibility of a DPW, and we did not, at our meetings, we did not leave it as we would look to an outside source to.
Well, I'm gonna defer to Mr. Ruda, because I was not there, but that's what was said.
I would like to
that
see the
night.
minutes of that meeting if that's what it was, because I was at every meeting.
comments.
Mr. Chairman, through you,
I'm just going by what was said.
through you, Tom, if that was not what the group agreed to, what did they agree to?
We never finished. We never came to a conclusion. The meeting just stopped. Mr. Marcy was chairman, and the meeting stopped.
Okay.
Again, I'm deferring to what was said at that meeting about 6 weeks ago when other commissioners
I
were
don't
here.
have a personal, my own personal, I'm just saying, I'm stating fact that what happened at the meeting, that's all I'm saying.
Fred, are you able to pick him up on mic? Okay.
Mr. Zakowski.
I was there.
Yes.
Scott Sikowski, I'm one of the Water and Sewer Commissioners, and I was asked by that board to draft a statement based on our discussions at our meeting last Wednesday night. One question I do have, though, the version, you talked about multiple versions of the report. One, you said you had a draft, and then another copy came out.
Right, with very little change
Yeah,
between the
which one
draft.
I'm just asking, which one did we get?
The second one.
We have,
Okay, we
oh,
got.
here we have,
It says final report.
We have,
Right.
this is a final report by contract they provide.
Okay, and that's fine. So, so that I got everything right, I just prepared a written statement, and actually, I made copies of it. It does say draft on the top because there are problems in it.
now, Scott, could you explain,
And it's not on letterhead, it says it's something that I,
all right, can you
Typed at
explain,
home.
can you explain the source of this document we're getting?
the source of this document, I
Thank you.
I drafted it myself,
So
You did.
based on notes from a meeting of the Water and Sewer Commission.
So you speak, this is an official,
This is, it's a draft
Document.
copy of it, yes.
from your board.
All right,
From
but
our
you're speaking now as an individual, not on behalf of the board.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Water and Sewer Commission.
So the board has authorized you to give this document to us as speaking for them?
They authorized me to draft a statement based on notes that we took from a meeting that we had last Wednesday after we spent a week reading through
Okay,
this
now, you know,
document.
Scott, that still doesn't answer my question. Have the other members of the board seen this document?
3 of them have, yes. 3 out of the 5 have.
All right, and have they authorized you to present this as representing the board's position?
Yes.
Okay.
So, just so that, stay on track, I'll just read it. Here we are again, another study of the need for a Department of Public Works. It seems that every 5 years or so, we go down this road again. We have each reviewed and the report presented today. Thank you for providing copies of this report in a timely manner so that a thorough review was possible. From that review, we have some basic observations. And again, part of the reason this is a draft is because some things were put in there that probably shouldn't have been. This professional report appears to be riddled with spelling and grammatical errors. That's why I asked what version we got. Much of the first 4 chapters where the Water and Sewer Department is concerned points out what we are already aware of and addressing. In some places, the information is incomplete and wrong.
Not what it says, Scott.
Outright wrong. Okay, I'll read it word for word.
Oh, if it's the document, I'd like you to.
We look forward to a paragraph-by-paragraph review in the near future. On the financial charts on page 15 and 16, many comparisons can be made. Of the communities polled, 2 communities, Oxford and Leicester, have private water systems, and 1, Leicester, has a private sewer department. 1 community, Charlton, does not farm its own water. 2 other communities, Charlton and Spencer, have an elected water sewer commission, and Webster has recently seated an appointed water and sewer commission. However, Webster is the only other community that currently has a DPW. Webster also has some very costly water quality issues that make them difficult to use for comparison. Now let's look at the one comparison point that, while taking all of the other irregularities into consideration, make the best one-to-one comparison. On page 15, let's look at the annual water cost per 120 HCF, I believe that's 100 cubic feet, and annual sewer cost per 120 HCF. In all cases except one, Dudley Water and Dudley Sewer Departments have the lowest costs. The one case where Dudley is not lowest in cost is compared to Charlton Water. Whereas stated earlier, they do not farm and treat their own water. They buy it directly from Southbridge. I want to point out again, our comparable costs are lower, in most cases considerably lower. On page 8, there is a chart listing recommendations. We assume that the appendix, a list of questions, findings, and recommendations, is the basis for those recommendations. A review of the 20 questions that pertain directly to the water sewer departments find that we are already about 90% compliant with their recommendations. When considering those benchmarks, we have direct control of. We have direct control of 17 of the 20. 2 are the responsibility of the Personnel Board, and 1 belongs to the Highway Department. Of those 17, the Dudley Water and Sewer Departments are compliant with 15. As for the other 2, we have not had a formal review of our rates in 19 years. Though we have always covered all expenses and had modest retained earnings, I for one agree that it is probably time to have a formal review again, and will recommend it at our next meeting. Maybe then we can finally get a complete accounting for indirect costs that for the past 15 months we have been unable to get. The other, in the area of long-term planning, we have been asked for, maintain, and provide an annual 5-year plan. We have also maintained the funding to be able to follow that plan. This report proposes that long-term planning be extended out to 10 and 15 years. It seems reasonable to us, however, that was never asked for in the past. In conclusion, the Dudley Water Sewer Commission has 3 major takeaways from this report. 1, Dudley Water and Sewer Departments have the lowest costs of all the communities compared, in some cases by a very large margin. The Dudley Water Sewer Department, number 2, the Dudley Water and Sewer Departments are already 88% compliant with this report's findings and recommendations. We were already 88% compliant with this report's findings and recommendations before it was even commissioned. The other 12% are reasonable recommendations and will be explored and acted upon. The adoption of this report and the hiring of a DPW director and the future engineer will only add cost to the Dudley Water and Sewer Departments. It is our assumption that the cost would be divided in thirds. This will add an estimated $150,000 to the Water and Sewer Departments with very little in return. Our conclusion, drawn directly from this report, is this. The Dudley Water and Sewer Commission, elected by the people of Dudley to maintain and operate its water and sewer systems, are doing a pretty good job. This report affirms that. It gives us some direction for improvements as well. This report calls out our very competent, able, and well-trained employees for doing their jobs well, maintaining and improving an aged water delivery and sewage collection systems. Thank you to our employees for the job they do. Though this report proposes to adopt the creation of a Department of Public Works, it is our conclusion that the data supports just the opposite. The Dudley Water and Sewer Departments are doing exactly what they were hired and elected to do. This proposal will only add cost to be borne by its customers while receiving little to no value in return. We look forward to sitting down with the Selectmen for a paragraph-by-paragraph review of this report in the very near future. For the Dudley Water and Sewer Commission, Mr. Witkowski.
Board members.
You know, before we go to board members, I want to ask you for a pointed, brief, staccato response to this letter that was just read.
You want to try it?
I'm a little concerned about our spelling and grammatical errors, but that's just pride of authorship, I think. Well, you know, when you look at the comparables, they are right. It's hard to produce an exact list of communities that are exactly like yours, but nevertheless, the comparables, you know, do tell a story.
They do.
And there's no question their costs are the lowest. But if you look at the challenges ahead with the I&I study, with the other improvements that need to be made to the sewer system, I think that you'd have to look at where those other municipalities are in their life cycle, and have they started to address them? Are they at the beginning, or are they in the middle, or are they at the end? And wherever they are, if they're further down the life cycle of I&I and repairing the pumps and the infrastructure that you folks have, that they all have, that's going to add costs to the water and sewer rates. Our point is that of capacity. We feel that there is capacity within the rates that are in place now and the retained earnings that are in place now to absorb these costs. Again, it may have a dollar impact, it may not. We're not criticizing the job that they have done. They've done a fine job. The issue is what lays in the future, and what would be the benefit of having a combined department where people can work together and use the assets that currently exist now within the whole town, and not just one town, not just one department, and not just another department. Well, I'm not sure if you want to.
No, I think, you know, we just got this, and to be fair to Scott, we have talked to him. We'd want to know where the incomplete outright wrong is and that type of thing. But I don't think we're ready to have that dialogue
Okay,
here.
just telling you, that I think you gentlemen are being kind and polite to a critical letter. And if that's your style, I appreciate that and I respect it. I read that report as well as anybody, the draft copy and this copy. And you know me, and Peter Jankowski knew me as someone who would pick up virtually every punctuation, spelling, and grammatical error, and I didn't see that. It's not in this report, all right? And I've read it more than once, and I've read it word for word. I do find it interesting, Scott, that on behalf of the Water and Sewer Commissioners, that you seem defensive when in their report they have been extremely complimentary of what you do. They haven't accused you of, the department, or the sewer commissioners, water commissioners, of usury, of overcharging based on your cost. So this long narrative about comparable costs is lost on me anyways, only because it seems to be a defense of what has not been attacked.
No, the only reason for doing that is to point out the fact that it's very difficult to compare community to community, because they are all different.
You could have said that in much less words and much kinder words.
I could have, yes.
You know, and to be fair, the consultants and all of us, water, sewer, everybody, we just went through something similar to this several years ago when you folks, when you had a retirement and you were proposing a pay raise for one of your employees. And what did you guys do? You brought in comparable towns of sizes and said, this is what they do. So,
that's
wait, I wasn't done, Scott. So other people have done it too, like we've done salary studies for town hall departments. You have to have something, you have to have a basis for something. And to go back to what I started to say, when you folks consolidated your position, you came to us, and I'm sure if I asked Michelle, she'd have the documentation for me tomorrow.
I remember
I
it.
guarantee you brought in Charlton, Webster, Oxford. I guarantee you used almost all the same towns these guys used to justify a salary. These guys, this report, as Paul just stated better than I can say, does not criticize water sewer operation, doesn't criticize highway operation. All it does is point out where they think we can find some efficiencies and we can find a chance to do some improvements. Whether the people want to do it, whether we go forward any further, who knows? And again, I'll ask you, you don't want to use comparables because of different towns, where'd you come up with the 150,000 split two-thirds out of three? You must have used a number somewhere, so you probably used the Charlton superintendent, the engineer, then you made it up, one or the other.
We assumed that a DPW director would make,
Where'd you get that
the
number?
foreman makes somewhere in the vicinity of 70,000, 60 to 70.
Where'd you get that number?
It's common knowledge.
It is.
It's in the back of our annual reports every year. The salaries, we just took an assumption that a DPW director would make somewhere in the vicinity of $80,000 to $100,000. That's an assumption. And again, this is just an assumption. And then an engineer, I work with engineers every day. They all make $100,000 or better.
But yeah, but Scott, remember
So
that
you take that and then you
an
divide
engineer is not
that
part of the
into
proposal.
thirds. What's that?
Funding an engineering position is not part of the proposal.
No, it's not, but it's in the
then
proposal
don't bring it
as,
up.
as something for the future. And
Okay.
again, I'm just saying that in the future, what we are looking at, what we see is the only thing that could come to water and sewer is cost, more cost.
I don't see that.
You know what, though, we had this discussion, well, it was kind of one-sided. I let it go 3 times at that meeting a couple months ago where some of your commissioners said, we take an oath to the ratepayers. No, you don't, you take an oath to the
We take an oath to the
taxpayers, to the town of
taxpayers,
Dudley to do
Dudley,
what's
that's
best.
correct.
And I agree with Paul, it's a pretty negative letter considering tonight's the first night we had a dialogue. It's extremely negative, and
It's not meant to be, it really is not meant to be negative.
well,
What it is meant to do is to point out our opposition to forming a DPW,
well,
straight up.
Your opposition has been very well duly noted, believe me.
Sure.
Even with an independent review, was there anything that could have come out of that review that the selectmen had nothing to do with, that would even put the idea of maybe considering a DPW on anybody's heads, or was it just a foregone conclusion? This is why we had the review, because
I read the report.
we couldn't have a dialogue or a discussion. We can't even agree on what happened at the last meeting. I mean, is there even a point at this, I mean, if everybody's decided I waited to see this report, and I said publicly, and I still say publicly, I will go with what the professionals recommend, and I'll consider what the commissioners have to say. It doesn't seem like the benefit of the doubt was applied evenly here.
Oh, absolutely. And I can only, at this point, I can only speak for myself. I drafted this, I know what's in it, and that's my position at this point. But if the case can be made that a DPW will provide economy to the community, and without generating extra cost to the ratepayers, then I'm all in. I'm never on anything absolute.
Okay. Was the report incorrect when he spoke about what the future holds for our infrastructure and so forth? There'll be a cost associated with repairing that. Was that incorrect?
No, it wasn't incorrect, but we are well aware of that. We are well aware of the costs that are involved and we know that we are going to be
Yeah, but there may be a
retiring
cost
debt.
increase. At some point, stuff costs money that we may have to actually pay
Oh,
for.
absolutely, absolutely.
So why don't we do it in the most effective and efficient manner possible
And that's what we're trying to do already.
by saying no?
No.
I love the
By saying
dialogue.
absolutely out of the question. That's how we deal with it.
I'm
No.
not-
I love the
Right.
dialogue, and Scott, and JJ, and myself, and gentlemen, Buzz, this is what we need to do, Bob, Robert, this is what we need to do.
Sure.
This is why the first step should be public dialogues. I want to point out two things, though. One, you said that this letter represented that you were speaking for the Sewer and Water Commissioners.
Right.
And then just a few moments ago, you said, I wrote this is my opinion.
No, I wrote this.
No, I'm just telling you, that's what you
based-
said.
Yes, I wrote this based on our notes and our discussion from this past Wednesday night, last Wednesday night, when we
Okay,
had a
but
meeting down in
I
our
want you to
office.
see where the gap appears it could be, just so you know what you said first and what you're saying now. But the second thing I want to note is this. The sewer and water doesn't exist in space by itself.
No,
It is part of this town.
absolutely.
And this is a commonwealth of Massachusetts. In Old English, that means the common weal or common good. So if you're not going to lose any, you, sewer and water commissioners, aren't going to lose any skin off your nose, and you shouldn't in this proposal, then you should, why would you not want to support the concept if it will make some things better and always continue to acknowledge the good job you guys are doing?
I'll be on, much of what was said tonight sounds very good. It really does. The one thing that I'm concerned about is cost. Cost that would be borne by ratepayers. And don't take this as being, excluding those those taxpayers who live outside of the water sewer district, the area where we serve. But because it's not. But what we're concerned about is costs that, as of now, are borne on the regular tax base that everybody in town pays for, being deflected to be into being borne by a greater, at a greater percentage by those people who are served by the water and sewer
Good point.
departments.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask this. If a water sewer foreman, that would not represent an increase in cost?
Nope.
No, okay, and I agree with that. So, and neither would a highway foreman,
Nope.
all right? But the cost you're worried about, I think, is the mucky muck up top. Right?
And a future engineering department, sure.
Well, don't-
But yeah,
you
I mean,
don't
that's
go
a
there.
future.
Don't go
And
there.
many departments with DPWs don't have engineers because they
I'm
can't
not going
afford
to
them.
tell you to worry about your next 5 kids.
Right.
Because they're not there yet, okay? So, the cost, let's say that the cost, and I think you may be accurate, let's say that the cost of a DPW director is, say, $90,000. Sewer, 1/3. Water, 1/3. The town budget, 1/3. So you're talking about $30,000 each.
Plus benefits and all of
Absolutely, and
that.
that's another, I think, 28 to, what, Rich? 28 to 30%? Okay. So again, it's split 3 ways in terms of cost.
But 2/3 of it is borne by that one department,
Right?
water and sewer.
Not one department, 2 departments. that are
Two
part of
budgets, one
town.
department, yes.
So we would split it 3 ways: water, sewer, town. Okay, so it's not a $150,000 increase. And beyond that, you would continue doing what you're doing, but the town would benefit from centralized supervision and let everything run well the way it is, and Water Sewer Commission is still gonna set everything, including policy.
I'll tell you where much of the concern comes from. And that is, and I mentioned it in here, is trying to get an accounting for how our indirect costs are proposed.
But this report has nothing to do with that.
Has nothing to do with that, but that yields the suspicion. I've been trying for 15 months to get an accounting.
Wait, keep going. Finish the statement. Suspicion of what?
Of just trying to deflect cost to a cost center, to a budget center that has the ability to pay for it.
Okay, now you hit the point of why the fiscal management is such an important part of this proposal. You hit it right on the head. Did a good job. Thanks for selling that part. All right? Something that's never been done has to be done. Okay.
Mr. Siganovich.
Buzz and Rob, I've got a question for you. And that's one thing that I would have a concern about going forward too, is cost. I want what's best for the people in this town as far as service and money-wise, out of their pocket. We've heard quite a bit lately about taxes going up, and I certainly don't want to increase anyone's taxes anymore. Is there room for efficiencies here by combining? Meaning, instead of having 3 leaf blowers, you have 1. Instead of having 1 guy plow, you have 3. Is there any significant money to be saved by combining and sharing things?
Well, I think the short answer is yes. I think the issue is the assets that you already have. The sharing of assets, the coordinating of assets and equipment, we think would be better addressed through having 1 director and having 21, or in this case 20, employees to draw from for any particular day, any particular project, any particular emergency. Obviously, on a day-to-day basis, you know, the water and sewer crews would have their specific responsibilities. The highway crew would have their responsibilities. But there are times when additional, hands are needed on deck. And we think that's where the cross-training, and that's where there could be some, we think, obvious efficiencies. But one of the things that I think was pretty interesting, when we were sitting here listening, I forget if it was the police chief, maybe it was the police chief that was here. He talked about grants. I think one of the issues that a professional DPW director should be aware of if he or she is doing his job, is look to where there are deep pockets. Look to where there can be grants applied for, state or federal grants. In our report, we use the term shovel ready for a number of grants. The state is looking for the ability to fund projects that can be jump-started, that can be ready to go. And having we think having a professional manager looking at these functions, looking at the projects that need to be addressed, can put the ducks in a row so that should grants become available, you can be there with the grant application going in.
So the Reader's Digest version, if I'm hearing you right, is if we do this right, we can save money.
Yes, I think the issue is
Thank you.
That's the demand that you put on the director. Pay for yourself, and a good director can do that.
For example, Mr. Chairman, a fire chief that we hired 6 years ago for, I think he started at 80-something.
No, it's that low on that.
Over $1 million in grants.
1.2 million in 6 years in grants, because he had previous grant writing experience.
Tom?
That's a good point, though, putting that into a job description.
Oh, that's one of the first things.
You would certainly do that. We did that in the Rutland advertisement, that the individual had grant writing experience. But
Our full-time employees do look for grants on a regular basis. Our former superintendent looked for grants. Our current look for grants. We have consultants that look for grants. There's not a lot out there for water sewer, but there are some. We do apply for them. We don't fall, in many cases, we haven't fallen into the category they're looking for, but we look, there's not a lot out there for.
I know Tom's waiting to talk, but I just want to ask one question, Tom, before I forget. I'd like to see, can you guys provide us a list of grants you've applied for and not received in the last year?
Grants applied for.
You just said you tried, you haven't got any. Can you tell me can you show us what you've actually applied for?
In the recent past, we haven't, because there aren't any out there.
Is none at all?
Well, they're exploring one now. Aren't you exploring a grant now? With the planning board, with the planner, and Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. But it's very demographic driven, and.
Most are, yeah.
And
most of them are.
And
I'd just be curious to see what you actually, if you actually have. You just said you've looked, and, I mean, it's nothing that we don't ask the chiefs to provide us, police and fire in the monthly report. Which, by the way, talk about indirect costs, it took us close to a year to get you guys to provide us monthly reports, and we get copies of your minutes of your meeting now. It's been much better with the interim superintendent, but it took us well over a year before we even got one report. The DPW director would have gotten that, and would have got you the information you wanted, probably.
On the other side, it's taken him over 15 months to try meeting to discuss how the indirects are being charged.
Well, you know what, and I'll tell you right now, Tommy, you know me well enough. If you could call me and say, Greg's not providing information, I would have had it for you within 2 days, I bet. I wish I had known. I mean, I see you enough in town, Scotty. If you said we're having trouble getting information.
I came down here twice, and.
Well, tonight's the first I heard of it, and I'm fairly certain Marcy was chairman last year.
With what I thought were appointments. I don't know what happened, but.
Greg, can you work on that with them? Thank you.
The hard part about it is I work 30 miles out of town. For me to come down here during the day, I have to take time off from work. It's difficult.
Don't come down during the day. Wait till late afternoon when you're out of work.
No, but they had a superintendent and they have an interim who could come in during the day.
Our superintendent. Indirect costs have been known because we've discussed them as recently as 3 years ago.
They went up drastically 2 years ago.
Look, I don't want to get into.
Longer than that.
But I don't want to get into a long discussion about indirect costs. But the indirect cost formula was developed about 18 years ago. And when I came to Dudley, those numbers had not been updated in 15 years. I sat down and I met with the previous chairman of the Water and Sewer Commissioner. We went through every single item. And the only thing that we changed was we updated those numbers from 2000 to 2015. None of the formulas, none of the percentages, none of the apportionment changed. The only thing that changed was what we actually spent on those particular items that comprise indirect costs. There were no additional items that were added. There were no items that were deleted. And if you go back and you touch base with your former chairman, you'll see that we had a very intelligent conversation. So I want to kind of keep the conversation. There's no secrets about indirect costs.
I remember
indirect
you
costs were
going through
updated.
that and reporting that to us.
Thank you.
I remember that. So it's
There was
not
no
secret.
changes made to formulas or percentages. If 5% of the municipal building, the cost related to the Dudley Town Hall municipal building was apportioned to water and sewer through indirect costs, then that 5%, based upon current numbers, was carried forward, and that's how the numbers were changed. And if health insurance costs go up, or employee benefit costs go up, and those items or insurance costs go up, then those items get carried forward in indirect costs.
Those are separate line items for us.
Okay, but I just want to be clear that there is no game going on with indirect costs. We didn't all of a sudden change the percentages. What we simply did was we changed the numbers, and we updated them from 2000 to 2015. That's it.
The bottom line is the percentages have been set since I've been on the board, and this is my 15th year as a selectman. They've been set, they've been updated, and they were updated, you updated them when you first got here. And then those percentages have been agreed to And it's only the dollars that change based on what the costs are.
One of the big differences one of the big changes for us that happened, and we can discuss this all
But I just,
offline.
look,
or
I
at another.
just want to point out that there were certain items where the Water and Sewer Department was given credit for their costs. And those credits were also increased to reflect current charges. So it wasn't, the door swung both ways. It wasn't as though we were simply looking to add costs. Where there are credits for things such as fire protection and hydrants, those increased credits were given to the Water and Sewer Department also. So I just want to be clear that you know, we're happy to sit down, and I think the consultants have made an excellent recommendation that we bring in an outside expert to review our indirect costs. But I don't think anyone's getting a bad deal in it, and I want to be clear, that's based upon 35 years of experience in calculating indirect costs. No one's being ripped off here. I want to be clear about that.
Thank you.
So your complaint, Scott, is not that anyone's being ripped off now, but you have suspicions because you don't know. And now, do you realize that that's the source of direct information?
Sure.
So, can you meet with him?
Yeah, I accept responsibility for that. I've had difficulty finding the document that I used to create those indirect costs, and that's part of the problem. It was a piece of paper that was written out 15 years ago, but that's my problem, that's my fault. I'll accept responsibility.
And again, from my own, one of the biggest things that that has changed since 2000, when we were in the other building, we had two offices, the water office and the sewer office. When we moved here, we had two offices.
That was part of the negotiations,
We had
I
water
remember.
office and sewer office. We're now combined into one office, half the space or less, but we're paying almost 3 times as much. I don't understand where that came from.
Who was the chairman? Danny O'Connor?
But, yeah, it was, but the calculation of space on indirect costs is not that little 20 by 20 office that's down there. It's that, plus it's a portion of all the common areas that exist in the building, and the bathrooms and such. You own a piece of the whole facility. And if there's a cost associated with plowing the parking lot, you own a piece of the cost of plowing the parking lot. And that's just the way it works. And if there's a cost with the maintenance contract for the elevator or the generator system or whatever, you own a piece of that too.
I understand that.
Okay.
Absolutely. I just wanted to, we'd like to see that.
And I appreciate that, and I will do that.
We would just like to see that, that's all.
Rich.
And again, we shouldn't be.
I was coming here to put a period on this. I'm the owner of the original Excel spreadsheet, which took everything and assembled it into this Byzantine formula, which drove the cost. Greg's 100% correct. Things don't increase by 1 or 2%. When National Grid increases what it costs to heat this building, the costs go up. Your percentage remains the same. You had 2 offices. We modified the formula so that you own X percentage of this building, and you own X percentage of what it's going to cost to repair the roof and everything in between. Costs are going like this, but the bottom line is it's 5 to 6% of $1 million business. Go down the street. What does McDonald's have for their overhead? They're not running at 5 or 6%. This is the best deal in town. And empirically, it can be defended. It came from an outside source. Prior to these gentlemen arriving, the Department of Revenue assembled a book, and it had all of the formulas in there. And now those formulas are being applied. Nothing's subjective. It's not, well, we don't like Zukowski, so let's make that a 20 instead of a 10. Empirically, all of these numbers fall into place, and you're being charged accordingly. The idea that they're under suspicion and they're being inflated in some way is an insult. And I don't want to hear that it's not meant to be that way. Very clearly, that's been announced. I'm here to say that the numbers are defensible. The formula came from outside. The numbers are defensible. And I think that should be reasonably, Mr. Chairman, if I could, end the discussion. I'll assist Mr. Valuconis. I'm sure the town accountant would be more than happy. I have the original copy. Everybody is welcome to it. So I'm pretty certain that going forward, or going backwards, that we have a correct number.
Oh, and we may
Ray,
very
can
well.
we get
It's
back
just-
to
we just
this
want to
now?
see that. We can discuss all of this
No, we can't. Let's get back to
outside.
this.
Outside.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But, Mr. Chairman, did Tom have his say yet?
He had some say.
The cost associated with this, if it's implemented. Water and sewer have their own future costs, we know of. I&I, new pipes in the ground, it's major. To add this kind of cost, if it might be only $50,000 for each department, but we don't see the benefit of the $50,000.
We don't-
Bottom line, what are we getting for the $50,000? Or 60, whatever it comes out to be per.
It's not that much, but okay.
Well, I would just hope, I think Paul's got a good suggestion. This is a good first step. We go to a public hearing where it can be just an agenda just for this. But speaking personally as a guy who doesn't do social media, but I have some very social media savvy board members who forward things, it's disheartening, and I'm sure it was as a private citizen, to see people who are elected officials in town accusing the Board of Selectmen of fiscal mismanagement when it comes to the fire station and the town hall. So I understand it didn't say so-and-so on this board. When you see the person's name associated with that comment, it makes me wonder if we're even getting a fair shake with these reports. So I don't do social media. I get it forwarded to me,
And
Can I?
and it's
First of all,
very,
I
very
didn't see-
disheartening.
I didn't see what you're talking about, I heard it secondhand. But from the water and sewer side, been asking, and I don't wanna bring this back up, indirect cost, been asking for 15 months to get clarification for us. It takes a second meeting with you guys here to put them on the spot to see if we can get it again. It shouldn't happen that way in town government.
Was there a previous meeting when you attempted to do this
twice,
with the Board of Selectmen?
not with the Board of Selectmen, no. I
Okay,
made
'cause
appointments.
Tommy implied you had two meetings.
I made appointments.
I apologize if I didn't mean the Board of the Selectmen.
Okay.
I made appointments, and when I got here, they weren't here.
Scott, I've already apologized for that.
I-
You know, and that's
I-
why I didn't wanna bring it up
I
again.
did.
That's where our dissension.
That's why I said let's
You
get back to
did,
this.
you did, and I understand that, and I'm.
I accept the responsibility.
I'm just, it's still an ongoing thing to try to get, we're just trying to get
But
some
it's being
information.
addressed, so it's
Okay,
not ongoing
okay,
anymore.
okay,
You
good.
had him say something, you had him say
Okay,
something.
okay,
It's
fine.
over. We're on
Okay,
here.
Good.
The
report.
Could I bring the board's attention to the fact that in this day of social media, things fly. You can look at tweets from the President of the United States, which are lies, and they come out every day. So you can't always trust what's in social media, but I'm going to put a challenge out. If there's anybody in this town who thinks that the Board of Selectmen has been fiscally irresponsible, I ask you to have the testistical fortitude to come in here and confront us,
I'll second that.
all right?
Okay, and I'm sorry. That's aimed at me. It was aimed at me last Monday night, too. I'm the person who said it.
Jesus, Mary, and
And
Scott, what's
let
wrong
me,
with
let me explain what happened. I came home from being out on the 24th of December to an irate spouse. Have you seen this bill? I said, what are you talking about? I said, well, you're at the town hall. Do you know what this 30% increase on Christmas Eve? So after getting yelled at and calming that whole situation down, I started pecking around on social media, and there was a whole long string there. And yeah, sometime, once you put it out there, you can't pull it back.
You know, there's an old adage. You can keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut, and nobody will know if you're an idiot. Or You can speak out and remove all doubt.
And by the way,
Again.
as an elected official, you do.
I didn't speak as an elected official, I spoke as a person.
Well, we do have a social media policy, and we've had to address issues in the past when people spoke on their own time concerning town affairs and non-town affairs. I mean, we have no disciplinary authority over another elected person, but when you take that oath to the town of Dudley, not the ratepayers, you swear with aura, you fall under all the policies and guidelines of the town of Dudley, not the
That's,
water and sewer.
you're absolutely right.
So, I didn't want to bring that up, but, like I said.
Thank you for starting a discussion.
And, you know, in the heat of the moment, I messed up. I did.
It's like Fonzie, you can't say sorry.
But you can't pull it back. Once it's out there, you can't
Now
pull
you,
it back.
Fonzie.
I haven't had the chance to. I really haven't. I thought of stepping
Okay,
up,
let's
but I didn't
move on.
want to.
Wait, no, Howie Superintendent,
But
please.
these gentlemen are here on their time.
Okay, Tom, he's coming up, go ahead.
I got a question on the.
He didn't hear me.
The management structure.
Good.
I know that the infrastructure for the town of Dudley is very important in the DPW study. However, the director seems to be taken out of the picture for infrastructure. It's still left up to the highway commissioners or the water and sewer commissioners to make that decision. No? Did I get that wrong?
Yeah.
Where does the director have the power to control the infrastructure or
So I think you did clarify that through the chair. Maybe I could have gotten it wrong, but I was under the impression it would still be operational authority with the director
Right.
and the foreman.
Bring it to
And the
us.
policy level stuff was water, sewer, and elected selectmen.
Right. Yeah,
So
this-
the day-to-day stuff has nothing to do with, we'll have everything to do with the director. The
Okay.
day-to-day operational stuff is why.
I thought that the director didn't have the infrastructure control, but it does.
Well,
Yes,
well,
absolutely.
the phraseology on this page, and I know it's other locations, responsibility and accountability will be located more clearly with a single department head who maintains authority and responsibility over an entire functional area under the direction of the town administrator. Pretty clear.
So I guess to follow up on that, then, who would, for example, determine priorities as to what is the next water? We just addressed Pine Street.
Water and Sewer Commissioners and the water foreman.
No, it's in here it's in here, I'll find the page, give me time, that the DPW director will be responsible, he will take input from the foremans, general foreman, working with a long-term capital improvement plan. He would bring it forward to the policymakers and ultimately to the selectmen, because we're responsible for presenting, or allowing it to be presented at town meeting. It's in here somewhere.
Policy-making bodies being a dual policy.
Right,
The
then-
Selectmen and the Water and Sewer Commission.
Ultimately us, because we're in charge.
Ultimately, if you put together the
Right.
whole CIP and everything else.
That's in here.
You'll have priorities and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I can't find it right away, I should have highlighted it, but that.
But to Scott's point, the Water and Sewer Commissioners, we envision them still deciding where that next water line's going, but you will have a professional sitting there with you, who's a Public Works Director, who says, you know what, while you're doing that, I'm gonna get my highway guys to go do the drainage up there and blah, 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 blah.
Which is not to say.
And then
that-
there's your $50,000 cost recuperated, because you don't have to do the drainage 3 years later and tear the road back up and everything else.
And poor Tom
Or
still has
maybe,
the question.
maybe now because it's a public infrastructure project, it qualifies for a grant as opposed to just a
Could be.
sewer line replacement.
Again, which to be fair, does happen on a general basis in town. I know they communicate a lot, and I'm sure, but as you stated, it would be clearly defined now that one person would be there'd be no more, oh, I gotta go back and dig up the road, because, like he said, the gates, or because of drainage, and,
Right.
you know, you
There's
do.
a coordination effort that takes place.
One of the, sorry, I keep hitting that thing. One of the findings, one of the 20 questions was about road opening permits. And I think, that was that's the one that I pointed out is under the control of the highway department. It should, in my notes, I know that that should probably be addressed, and we should probably be doing more of a per project, aside from emergencies, obviously. We got a water main break tonight, we're not gonna wait until we get permission to cut the road open to fix it. But for the long-term projects, those should be discussed with the highway department, absolutely. So that things, didn't something else get done at the same time that, Pine Street was done? The Pine Street?
Yes.
Didn't gas come in and do something at the same time? So that the road was only open up once?
Yeah, water, gas, and the highway picked up the balance to refinish the road.
Well, yeah, we're talking about paving, but while we were opening it for the water line, somebody else was opening the road at the same time.
Okay, so here we are. We're down to the steps to be taken.
Sure.
And the one thing that we want to insert up front is that there need to be public forums, or fora, actually. And I would hope that you gentlemen don't charge us extra to at
Charge
least
extra for
explain once or twice.
Should charge extra for tonight.
All right, and answer questions. Am I asking you to do it pro bono? No. Screw the contract. I'm saying it would be nice if you would come once or twice and help us answer the questions. I'm not looking for an answer, all right, now, but that's my feeling.
I don't know. George, come on up.
I don't like coming up here.
You have no choice. I'm not gonna recognize you otherwise.
We don't either.
I'm not gonna say too,
You
I'm
can
not
do
gonna
like
say
Jay,
too much.
just sit in the back like Jay and take it
Yeah,
all
who are
in.
you, sir?
Just be aware that we have a small system. This is all great for systems that encompass the whole town. However, we have licensed personnel who are now following certain guidelines by the state, mandated daily guidelines, weekly, monthly, and I'm not going to get into them all. I see one problem with this director, that we be answering to a director who may have other agendas out there where our license requires us to do certain things that he may not want to do at the certain times, which get into conflicts. I'm not risking license in a conflict. If I am told by the state to do something, it has to be done at a certain time, and if a director's going to tell me no, we're going to have a conflict. So just keep that in mind. And this has happened in a neighboring town where the state had to step in and tell the town what needed to be done. I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, again, you know what, George?
Yeah, look at the report.
Well, no, I was gonna say, talk about George's, as you say, we're a small enough town, small enough system, small enough, you can come and find me and say, as long as I'm a selectman, you can come and find me about any.
Oh, I plan to come to your house for some dinner, and we'll have a
about
nice
dinner. I
discussion,
didn't
because
say
I have no
about
problem
dinner,
with that.
No, but I'm
No,
saying, I mean, that kind of stuff that's what's handled when you say, no, I have to do it, and he says, I'm telling you no, you go see the administrator who will have ultimate authority, or you come find one of us. I mean,
Yeah, but if you look at the report, you will see that they specifically emphasize the importance of a DPW director being aware of, having experience in, and knowing about
right, knowledge.
specifically the licenses needed for water department.
Question is, does the director have a license to operate in the town, and he has the necessary year of experience in the town to operate that license, and that's the problem. You have to be an operator in the town, the existing town, for 1 year to be a full operator with treatment.
Unless he's not hands-on, and we have a foreman who does have those licenses.
But if there's a conflict, like I just said, regarding what something might want to be done that we have to do, and he's against that, then we get into a conflict.
Oh, no,
with
this is an easy solution, George.
Yeah.
Listen, it's called a pink slip.
You hire a guy who's not going to be
I won't have to worry about
reasonable.
that, but I'm just saying.
No, I do.
No, I'm saying I won't have to worry about that, but I'm just saying, look at those type of things. I know everybody's tired, but I just thought I'd make that clear. It's not the old boys coming out with the shovels when there's a main break now. It's coming out with the shovels, the tractors, the equipment, and the licenses, and the requirements, and it's bad, and it's getting worse. And the requirements out there that we have to do for testings and samplings and alarmings and chemicals, and this is outrageous. And you guys, I really wish you would understand that, because nobody understands it but us, because we're doing it all the time. And it'd be nice for somebody to come and see what we do what's going on, what's changing, what's getting even worse now for requirements. It's a monopoly. But
The good thing is that wouldn't change, George, because you guys will still be licensed, you'll still be required.
I understand that, but like I said, when I see conflict, I don't want to, and I'm using the town as an example, we had a big in on what happened there because we avoided it. We didn't want to have that go on, and this kind of scares me. But, like I said, I'll let the rest of the guys duke it out. Thank you.
Duke it out.
All right, where do we go from here,
No.
Mr. Chairman?
You good?
I'm good.
Good?
And,
I'll make comment after.
you know, if it's all, if it all plays out and it makes sense, then absolutely. I'm not 100% committed. This is our opinion at this time.
Well, the good thing is, all we did was accept their report. We didn't take a vote on the findings.
We just wanted to put it out there.
My last statement, if you want to.
Yeah.
If it's cost effective and we get bang for our buck, there's no reason why we shouldn't back it. No.
That's exactly what I said.
Egos here to contend with whatever you want to call it. But at this moment, we don't see bang for the buck when the money's spent.
Well, I think too, I mean, like I said, we're gonna have public hearings. If there's upfront costs that generates long-term savings and efficiencies, yeah, we have to look at the big picture.
Are you on to Selectmen's comments?
I don't know, we all done? Gentlemen, you good?
We're good. We will follow up with Greg, if you don't mind, and if you guys decide that you want some public meetings, then we'll talk with Greg.
Well, I think
We'll likely be here for you, Paul.
Likely is, okay, not as strong a word as I would like.
We gotta, like we just talked about, we've got a boss too, we gotta talk to. I bet.
Paul.
I move we adjourn. Wait, anybody got anything to say?
Silence good.
Wait, motion's made and seconded.
Wasn't seconded.
Well, out of discussion, I did.
Oh.
Out of discussion, you could have.
I'll wait till everybody has what they want to say.
He likes to go last.
Hearing nothing.
Hearing no further comment on the, no, I have nothing. I'm fine with that.
I'm good for tonight.
I'm good, I got it all.
I move we adjourn.
And I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone that came tonight.
Thank you.
Good meeting.
Really appreciate it.